Hi guys, welcome to the end. We are finally on the very end of Kingdom of Ash, the final book in the Throne of Glass series. It has been a long but wonderful journey to get here. So far in this series, actually in total, because I know how many slides there are total, there have been 2,488 slides that we've gone through on this series together. So far, not including this video, because who knows how long this video is. I'm estimating 3 hours. But who knows? We've had over 39 hours of video. That is like a full week of work in corporate America. I'm so glad that you've made this journey with me. It's been so much fun to chat with people in the comments, and I want to continue chatting with people. I mentioned this last video, but I want to mention again, if you have any questions, comments, things you want me to talk about, I'm going to do another video in a couple weeks where I chat Throne of Glass. It's just going to be like a chatty Throne of Glass video. I'm going to do some character rankings. I'm going to talk about what I would want to see if Sarah ever wrote a spin-offs book. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite moments. I'm going to talk about maybe some book recommendations for what to read if you want Throne of Glass vibes. So if you have any questions about Throne of Glass, you want my opinion on something, you want to know what I thought, what I think each character's favorite Taylor Swift album would be. If, I don't know, get creative. Ask me the questions in the comments down below. I would love to chat with you about them. So excited about that. So that'll be coming up. And then after that, well, maybe before that, I don't know. I don't know what the order of these videos will be. It depends on what my mood is. But the next book I'm going to be recapping. We're taking a little Sarah J. Maas break. We will be doing ACOTAR. I pinky promise eventually. But I need a little Sarah J. Maas break. I need something that's a little less. A little less. Mostly I'm picking this one because I want to do a reread before the new book comes out. And so I'm bringing you along on the journey with me. The book we are going to be recapping next is Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. It is a vampire fantasy romance sort of book. Sort of. Let me kind of explain what it is if you're not familiar and you're interested. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited too. So if you're a Kindle Unlimited girly, you can go ahead and read it. But it is a fantasy world where vampires and humans are living. Okay. And it's a series of duologies. So the first duology is complete and it follows one couple. And we're about to start a new duology that's going to follow a new couple. But the world building and stuff from the first book is going to come into play for the second book. So we're going to need to remember what happened there. Also, the first books are a fun time. There's a Hunger Games-esque competition. It's not really Hunger Games-esque, but there's a competition that's at the heart of the first book. I love the romance. We're following a human girl who's raised in this vampire world, and so she has to be tough and spunky. So that's what we're going to be doing next, just because that feels more digestible to me. 2 books and a novella, and I'm hoping they're going to feel more like those early Throne of Glass books in terms of how long these videos are going to get. You're not going to get, I don't know, what is Kingdom of Ash going to be? I'm going to wind up spending probably 12, maybe more. Yeah, probably around 12 hours of video on this one book. And we just we can't do that. So just something a little bit more digestible for this fall season. That's not why you're here. We have a lot to talk about with Kingdom of Ash. Today is actually probably going to be one of the longest videos in this whole series because I have 150 slides. Normally I have 100 to go through for a video. 150 for this one. Quickest ever recap on what we were talking about last video. The big thing was the 13th sacrifice at the end of the last one, which just gutted me. We will talk about it a couple more times as Manon kind of has to grieve that loss and tell people that it's always in my heart and mind. I'm thinking about it. And we have to deal with Maeve. Right now we kind of have 2 groups. We have a group that is at Orynth, and that is going to be the witches and Lysandra and Aelin. They are in Orynth actively fighting Morath. And then we have the group that contains Aelin, Rowan, and the boys lurking to lead in all the southern continent, including, I'm lumping Aelin with them because he kind of traveled with them. So we have them in the south. Oh, so they just also picked up Dorian. We're going to jump in right there. They just grabbed Dorian. That's where we'll be starting. They're coming from the south. They're trying to get to Orynth as fast as they can because they know the battle is happening there. Meanwhile, the people in Orynth are trying to hold off the forces as much as they can. They do not know that the southern continent is coming. They're just trying to figure out a way to not die, mostly. Okay, let's start. So, like I said, we jump right back in with Mr. Dorian arriving. He was flying in I was going to say Abraxas form, Wyvern form. There's more than one Wyvern. He was flying in Wyvern form, and he spotted this army. He spotted Aelin, dropped down, shifted. Because remember, Dorian has every magic now. He shifted back into human form, and now he's chit-chatting with Aelin. And he is like blown away by the size of the Southern Army. He's like, oh my gosh, Chaol did it. They are here. His second thought is, where is Chaol? Where is my bestie bro? And Aelin, Rowan, and Aelin are the ones that he lands right in front of, and they're coming towards him. And Aelin immediately senses the word keys as he grows close, and you can just like feel that tension because they both know, like, okay, this thing that we've been dreading, this like thing that we've been putting off, this thing that we know has been coming for us is happening. Like the word keys are already all here now, and we're gonna have to deal with this. And Aelin says to Dorian, like, where's Manon? You traveled with Manon. And he's like, Terrasen, like the witches headed to Terrasen, and likely with the Crocians, everything went according to plan. And Aelin is like, wow, oh my gosh, yay. I mean, she's excited because she's like been very worried about Terrasen. She is not confident that they're going to be able to hold off Morath's troops, and it's good to know that at least the witches are there to help out. But then Chaol comes riding down the road, and he has Yrene behind him. I'm going to read you a little section. The approaching rider halted. A beautiful woman Dorian could only describe as golden, right behind. But Dorian stared at the rider before him, at the posture of the body, at the commanding seat he possessed. As Chaol Westfall dismounted and ran the last few feet towards Dorian, the king of Ardalan wept. I love this so much. Chaol didn't hide his tears, the shaking that overtook him as he collided with Dorian and embraced his king. No one said a word, though Chaol knew they were all gathered, knew that Yrene stood behind him, crying with him. He just held his friend, his brother. I knew you'd do it, Dorian said, voice raw. I knew you'd find a way, for all of it. The army, for the fact he was now standing. Okay, welcome to the last video. Am I crying on slide 1? Yeah, obviously. Did anyone for a second doubt that I was going to tear up when Dorian and Chaol were reunited? If you did, you weren't paying attention, because everyone knows my favorite relationship in this novel, in this whole series of books, is Dorian and Chaol. I love their best friend bromance, and I will love it until the end of time. It's the best thing in this book. And for them to be reunited, it's beautiful. And then Chaol introduces Yrene to Dorian. He says, this is the woman responsible for this, Chaol said, motioning his standing, his walking to the army stretching down the road. Yrene Towers, a healer at the Tor Sesame, and my wife. I love this so much. I love a Dorian-Chaol reunion. Yrene bowed, and Chaol could have sworn a flicker of sorrow darkened Dorian's eyes, but then his king was taking Irene's hands, lifting her from her bow. And though that sorrow still edged his smile, Dorian said to her, thank you. Yrene went scarlet. I've heard so much about you, Majesty. Dorian only winked, a ghost of a man he'd been before. All bad things, I hope. I love this, particularly because I think that is exactly what Aelin says to Nesryn when she arrives to, like, meet the Southern Continent contingent. And I love that little, like, mirroring. Yrene laughed, and the joy on her face, the joy that Chaol knew was for both of them, made him love her all over again. I've always wanted a sister, Dorian said. Welcome to Ardalan, lady. Irene's smile turned softer and deeper as she laid a hand on her abdomen. Then you shall be pleased to hear that you shall soon be an uncle. Dorian's smile kind of, like, fades. I don't think he's, like, sad about the news, obviously. Maybe a little. Maybe he's a little bit like, oh, my best bro's gonna be a stretched little thing. Looks over at Aelin, and he just, like, recognizes that one of them is not gonna be able to see Chaol become a father. Like, one of them will not have the opportunity to, like, see this life that Chaol's built. Like, Chaol has built a future for himself, and Dorian and Aelin aren't gonna be able to build futures for themselves. Like, at least one of them. And, I think that's kind of heavy, you know? Aelin obviously knows that Dorian has the word keys, and Dorian explains that he got the third word key from Orynth and how Maeve was there, and kind of just tells the whole story of, like, what happened with the keys. Dorian explains kind of that Aelin's letter had caused Dornell to kick Maeve to the curb. They, like, got rid of her as queen, and Rowan says to her, you said your letter was strongly worded. I should have believed you. Literally, you should never bet against Aelin Galathynius. On your life, what a mistake. Never bet against Aelin Galathynius, especially Aelin Galathynius writing a letter. She's gonna get what she wants. Everyone is, like, pretty worried about this Maeve Erawan alliance, and it feels, like, quite dangerous. Like, things might spiral into a not so great place, like, pretty quickly. They also talk about, like, the Iron Teeth, and they talk about how the ones in the Fairy Gap were only half of the Legion. The other half was in Morath, and they were just leaving as Dorian was leaving, so they have not reached Terrasen yet. And Nesryn is like, you know what? It's not a big deal. We knew the Rooken were going to be outnumbered. Like, we knew that's kind of what we were going to face as an aerial legion. And Caution is like, yeah, but by the time we get there, there may be nothing left to defend. And Aelin is like, okay, great. So we need to kind of like sit down and talk about our choices. We have two choices the way I see them. One, we continue doing what we're doing. We go north as fast as possible and we do what we can for what is left when we arrive. Two, we use the word keys right now and I end this. I get rid of Erawan, which will really like pretty cleanly get rid of a lot of the Valg forces over there. And then then you, without me, because I will be gone, we'll continue forward and deal with what's happening at Terrasen. And Rowan is like, no. Rowan's like, incorrect. I'm not going to let you use the word keys. Like, we're going to find another way. And Aelin is like, Rowan, I literally can't with you right now. I know this is a sad bummer of a time, but like, sorry. And she says, it's not my choice alone. Like, the choice we're making here is going to affect everyone. And Dorian's like, yeah, the choice is also mine. Slowly, so slowly, Aelin looked at him. Chaol braced himself. Her voice was deadly soft as she said to Dorian, you retrieved the third key. Your role here is done. And Dorian's like, no. The same debt flows in my veins. The same debt is mine. He's the sweetest boy in all the land. He said, no, I'm going to make the sacrifice. I just like came to chat with you first about it, but like, I'm going to go take care of the keys. And Aelin's like, are you so eager to die? And Dorian's like, are you? Regardless of who will put the keys back into the gate, this is a fate that belongs to all of us. So all of us should decide. Her chin lifted. Do we continue on to war? Hope we make it to Orynth in time. And then destroy the keys? Or do we destroy the keys now? And then you continue northward. A pause. Horrible and unbearable. Without me. Rowan was shaking. Whether with restraint or in dread, Chaol couldn't tell. Aelin said, unwavering and calm, I would like to put it to a vote. Rowan is like, we're not going to vote on whether my wife is going to die. Like, that's not cool with me. But at the same time, he's thinking about how proud he is that she's chosen Endover, because they're just outside of the Endover salt mines as this is happening, as this place to, like, reclaim her future, to, like, reclaim what she will become. Like, this, like, moment of rebirth where she will rise again. And Rowan is just, like, standing there, like, half listening, half kind of, like, disassociating as the people around him start to debate the merits of, like, murdering his wife. Not murdering her, but like allowing his wife to sacrifice herself for his wife to like not see tomorrow. And as they're talking about her, they're just like talking about her as if she is not this woman that they all like know and love. And Dorian at the same time is like, I should do it. Chaol and Aelin are both like, no, absolutely not. And then Fenris is like, hey, Chaol, you can't be saying that. You would rather my queen die than your king. And Chaol is like, TBH, I would love a third option where neither of them die. But if I'm gonna have to pick, yeah, I'm gonna go with the boy that I've known since I was 11 and have sworn my life to protect. Sorry. I don't think, no shame on that. People do give crap to Chaol for this moment, but like, sorry, like he really would prefer neither of them die. But like, his like sole purpose in life, we have to remember what's Chaol's core tenet. It hasn't disappeared, although he's gained other pillars. He's built a stronger foundation. It's not just centered on this one pillar of loyalty to Dorian, but like loyalty to Dorian and making sure his bestie bro survives is like his core tenet. And like Aelin is just like this girl that he's known, and like he loves Aelin. He will always love Aelin. He like fell in love with her when they were like briefly dating, but I think he still like deeply loves her and deeply respects her and deeply values what she's doing and what she stands for, and like how much that he has gained from her. The fact that like his wife, he has his wife thanks to Aelin. There's not a moment where I think that Chaol has forgotten any of that, but I also think that like Dorian will always be his number one. Maybe his number two now that he has Yrene, but like, you know, definitely top two. Yrene sees that this conversation is going nowhere productive as they argue about like just nonsense. She asks, when you seal the word gates, will all the gods disappear? Like, what about my powers? Like, my powers actually would be, like, super helpful, as we've established. Like, the healing magic works, like, quite well against the Valg. So, by sealing these word gates, will the healing powers completely leave? Because that would probably put them at a disadvantage. And Dorian is like, I don't think they should leave based on, like, kind of what we know about magic. And Hussar, like, I think our gods are different than these gods. Like, the god situation is confusing. And Yrene is like, okay, sick. The Southern Continent gods are different. Could they help us then? Like, that would be great if we could have some gods on our side. And Dorian's like, I think if the Southern Continent gods could have helped, they probably would have at this point, to be honest. And Aelin is like, guys, the gods will not help us. The gods are literally the worst. Expecting divine handouts is a waste of our time and not the topic at hand. She fixed her burning stare on Dorian. We are not also debating who shall pay the cost. Why? Rowan's low question was out before he could halt it. Slowly, his mate turned towards him. Because we're not. Sharp, icy words. She cut Dorian a look, and the King of Ardalan opened his mouth. We're not, she snarled. We don't have endless time to waste on debate. And Lorcan is like, I actually think it would make more sense to utilize your powers up north, to like take you north to put a dent in Erawan's forces. And Aelin is like, no, I don't think you're being objective right now. Pretend you do not know me. Pretend I am no one and nothing to you. Pretend I am a weapon. Do you use me now or later? And Aelin says, you are not no one though. Aelin said quietly, not to a good many people. And Aelin is like, so there's no situation in which I survive this. It's like, do I die today or do I die in a week and a half? You know, there's no situation in which it's like, oh, actually, let's all just have a picnic and have a fun little time. At some point or another, the keys are going to have to go back in the gate and I go with them. We are just deciding whether that's going to be now or in a couple weeks. And Rowan is like, no. And Aelin is like, buddy, my love, not doing anything is not an option. And then Rowan is like, or we could hide the keys. We could put things off. That's what Elena did. Like, we could just do it again. What an idea. He lost them for thousands of years. We could do it again. Aelin could destroy him all on her own. Yrene could destroy him all on her own. Like, you guys are both so powerful. Also, Dorian is like pretty powerful too. Like, we have a lot of power on our side. Like, I think we could do it without the keys. And Yrene is like, yeah, I can do it. Yrene said, stepping away from Kael's side, if there's a way I could do it, see if the healers could help, like, I would be happy to put Erawan down. No big deal. And Aelin is like, Yrene, there are going to be thousands of Valg for you to destroy or save, Lady Westfall. Aelin said with that same cold. Erawan could slaughter you before you even got the chance to touch him. Like, how am I even going to get you to Erawan to give you the opportunity to try? And Yrene is like, why are you allowed to sacrifice your life, but none of us are allowed to do the same? And Aelin was like, you're pregnant. That, like, kind of changes things. And Yrene blinked slowly. Hafitza might be able to. I will not play a game of what ifs and mights. We vote now. Do we put the keys back in the gate immediately or continue to Terrasen and try to stop that army first? And Yrene is like, Erawan can be stopped. I know he can without the keys. We can stop him. Aelin kind of like ignores her and points to Hussar and says, how do you vote? Hussar votes now. Then Dorian votes now. Rowan closed his eyes, barely heard the other rulers and their allies as they gave their replies. He walked to the edge of the trees, prepared to run if he began to vomit. Then Aelin said, you're last to vote, Rowan. I vote no. Not now, not ever. Her eyes were cold and distant, the way they'd been in Mistward. It's decided then, Kael said, quietly, sadly. At dawn, the lock will be forged, and the keys will go back into the gate, Dorian finished. Rowan just stared at his mate. His reason for breathing. Aelin asked softly, what is your vote, Aelin? Aelin tore her eyes from Rowan, and he felt the absence of that stare like a frozen wind as she said, it doesn't matter. All right, I actually have a question for the class. A question for the class in this moment. I have heard a lot, and by heard a lot, I mean, I've seen videos and, like, people talking about Throne of Glass, and they talk about how, like, nobody voted for Aelin in this vote, except Rowan, and I just, like, don't know if that's true. Maybe I misread the scene, or maybe Sarah said something in, like, a later interview. The only votes we see are Hussar and Rowan, and, like, in the conversation earlier, it seemed like Yrene was on board with, like, bringing Aelin up there. I don't know, maybe Yrene doesn't get a vote. But, like, Lorcan didn't seem super up. I, like, feel like, who's voting? I don't know who got to vote. And also, like, I don't know if they all voted against her, or if it was just, like, a majority voted. Like, and against her also makes it sound like they were like, Aelin, are you gonna die or not? It was, like, Aelin was very clear, like, am I gonna die today or next Wednesday? You know? I don't like how the scene is framed in conversations. Tell me if I'm wrong about us not actually knowing who voted for what. Because I feel like, I don't think we know. I think we know that the majority voted for now instead of later, which were the two options. But I don't think we know, everyone who got to vote, because I don't know if, like, Yrene got a vote. I don't know if, like, Aelin got a vote. I don't know if Lorcan got a vote. Like, I don't know if it was just, like, Hussar, Caution, Sartak, Aelin, Rowan, Dorian, Kael, because they're, like, in charge of stuff. I don't know. Please let me know if you know. Aelin and Rowan, like, go back to their tent. Rowan has, like, requested that the royal tent be set up. And we get this little, like, internal monologue from Aelin. Aelin didn't say that asking them to vote hadn't just been about letting them decide, as free peoples of the world, how to seal its fate. She didn't say that it had also been a coward's thing to do, to let someone else decide for her, to choose the road ahead. And they get back to their tent, and Aelin's flipping through those books of word marks again, really trying to find something, anything that could help them. And Rowan brings her dinner and is like, I do not accept this. And Aelin is like, I do. Like, this is what's happening. And Aelin is like, you know, maybe I could have put it up a couple days so I could see Terrasen one last time. Because remember, she, like, was able to barely step foot in Terrasen at the beginning of Empire Storms, and then she was booted. And besides that, she has not been in Terrasen since she was 8 years old. Even when she was in Endover, she talked about it with Lead last video. When she was in Endover and just miles from the Terrasen border, she felt she was going to die without being back in her homeland. And once again, she's going to sacrifice herself and not get to go home to Terrasen. And then Rowan and Aelin fight for a while. They go back and forth, and Rowan is just like so against his 19, she's 19 years old, which, like, let's talk about why she's 19 and married, but his 19-year-old wife being sacrificed to save the world, and like how against that he is, which, like, reasonable thing to be against. And Rowan is like, why not let Dorian do it? You know, like, Dorian said he would do it. And Aelin is like, he's my friend, I could not live with myself. And Rowan is like, okay, fine, then we forge the lock together. Like, if you're gonna sacrifice yourself, I'm gonna sacrifice yourself. And Aelin is like, no. And Rowan is like, okay, what if we just delayed till Orynth? Like, see if maybe the Royal Library has some, like, text on, like, another way to seal the gate. And Aelin is like, no. What is the point of a vote if we ignore it? Like, they voted, now we do it now. And Rowan is like, I will find another way, Aelin, you just have to give me some time. And Aelin is like, there is no other way. All of this has been to keep all of you alive, all of it. And then Rowan is like, wait, I actually have an idea. What if you and Dorian did it together, and then you could give a little bit of both your power, but you both wouldn't die because you'd be, like, sharing in the burden, like that time you brought down the glass castle. And Aelin's like, okay, well, we don't know if that's gonna work. And Rowan's like, well, I would rather have a chance at you surviving than, like, no chance at all. Like, it's better than walking into your own execution with your head bowed. She snarled, how could I ever ask him to do that? And Rowan says, because it is not your burden alone. That's why. Dorian knows this, has accepted it, because the alternative is losing you. The rage in his eyes fractured, right along with his voice. I would go in your stead if I could. Her own heart cracked. I know. Rowan fell to his knees before her, putting his head in her lap as his arms wrapped around her waist. I can't bear it, Aelin. I can't. She threaded her fingers through his hair. I wanted that 1,000 years with you, she said softly. I wanted to have children with you. I wanted to go to the afterworld together. Her tears landed in his hair. Rowan lifted his head, then fight for it one last time. Fight for the future. And it's the literal middle of the night. So they go into Dorian's tent, and then Aelin is just, like, standing above Dorian and is like, hi, I need to ask you something. She doesn't say hi, she just says, I need to ask you something. Jump scare. The Ashriffers really need to take a course on, like, how to wake people up when they are sleeping. Like, a gentle way. Like, please give Dorian a second before you ask him to sacrifice himself. Like, he was just dead asleep. Give him 30 seconds to wake up before you're like, hello, do you want to come in the word gate with me? Dorian's, like, groggily, like, what? Aelin's like, hey, so what if we forge the lock together? Like, sorry to ask, sorry to bring it up. Like, but, like, what if we do it together? And Dorian's like, yeah, for sure. Sorry you didn't think about it first. And then Aelin's like, okay, we go now. We do it before the others wake up, before the goodbyes. Dorian nodded. She had only asked, do you want Chaol to be there? He thought about saying no. Thought about sparing his friend from another goodbye when there was such joy on Chaol's face. Such peace. But Dorian still said yes. Literally ripped my heart out of my chest. I love this so much. I understand that Chaol is a married man now. Love that for him. And, like, Dorian loved Sorsha in this, like, really beautiful way, and now he has the thing with Manon. But, like, I believe in my heart of hearts. I believe in my heart of hearts that if in this universe they're, like, mystical, magical soulmates that your souls are, like, tied to, I believe Dorian and Chaol's are tied together. In a platonic way. I'm not saying that they have to kiss. That they for sure could if they wanted to. I don't, you know, again, Chaol is married and Dorian is busy, like, you know, kissing and falling in love with every single beautiful girl he sees. But I do believe that they are, like, platonic soulmates. And I love the fact that Aelin sees that and is like, do you want me to get Chaol? Do you want me to bring Chaol? So the four of them head towards the salt mines. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd escaped shackles twice now, only to wind up back here. A temporary freedom. Borrowed time. And Chaol's like, okay, what do you need us to do? And Aelin says, be here, that is enough. Dorian and Chaol are hugging, and Aelin starts drawing word marks on the ground with her foot. And Rowan says to her, no sweet farewells, princess? Rowan asked. They seem dramatic, Aelin said. Far too dramatic even for me. But Rowan halted her. The second symbol half finished, tipped back her chin. Even when you're there, he said. His pine green eyes so bright under the moon. I am with you. He laid a hand on her heart. Here, I am with you. She laid her own hand on his chest and breathed his scent deep into her lungs, her heart. As I am with you, always. Rowan kissed her. I love you, he whispered onto her mouth. Come back to me. And then they get started. Dorian and Aelin step into the word marks that she's drawn, and then Aelin goes to slice her arm to put the word keys inside of her. The stars seemed to shift closer, the mountains peering over Aelin and Norian's shoulders as she sliced her knife a third time down her forearm. Deep and wide, skin splitting, to open a gate, she must become the gate. Erawan had begun the process of turning Kaltain Rompierre into that gate, had put the stone within her arm not for safekeeping, but to prepare her body for the other stones, to turn her into a living word gate that he might control. Just one sliver in her body had destroyed Kaltain. To put all three in her own, my name is Aelin Ashura Galathinius, and I will not be afraid. I will not be afraid. I will not be afraid. Ready? Aelin breathed. Dorian nodded. With a final look at the stars, one final look at the Lord of the North, standing guard over Terrasen, mere miles away, Aelin took the shards from Dorian's outstretched palm, as she and Dorian joined bloodied hands. As their magic roared through them and wove together, binding and eternal, Aelin slammed the 3 word keys into the open wound of her arm. Meanwhile, Rowan, seals the word mark that Aelin had created on the ground to, make sure that they are, I don't know, stuck where they're at. And Kale and Rowan are just, watching these, lifeless bodies. It's they are just, shells. They're, standing there, but there's, nothing going on of Aelin and Rowan. Something in Rowan's chest, intricate and essential, began to go taut, the mating bond. Rowan lurched forward a step, a hand on his chest. No. The mating bond writhed, as if in agony, as if in terror. He halted, Aelin's name on his lips. Rowan fell to his knees as the 3 word keys within Aelin's arm dissolved into her blood, like dew in the sun. Then we follow Aelin and Dorian as they, spin through the word gate. As it had been once before, so it was again, the beginning and the end, an eternity and a torrent of light, of life that flowed between them, 2 halves of a cleaved bloodline, mist swirled, veiling the solid ground beneath, an illusion, perhaps, for their minds to bear, where they now stood, a place that was not a place, in a chamber of many doors, more doors than they could ever hope to count, some made of air, some of glass, some of flame, and of gold and light, a new world beyond each, a new world beckoning, but they remained there, in the crossroads of all things, in the bodies that were not their bodies. They stood amid all those doorways, their power pouring out, pulling before them, blending and merging, a ball of light of creation hovering mid-air. Every ember that flowed from them into the growing sphere before them, into the lock, taking form, would not return. It would not replenish. A well running dry forever, more and more and more, ripping from them with each breath, creation and destruction. The sphere swirled, its edges warping, shrinking, forming into the shape they'd chosen, a thing of gold and silver, the lock, that would seal all these infinite doors forever. Still, they gave over their power. Still, forming of the lock demanded more, and it began to hurt. They're in this hallway that is just lined with these doors to various worlds, and they're standing at the door that leads to Aurelia and Terrasen, and it smells of pine and snow. And Dorian and Aelin are pouring all of their magic into creating this lock, which is actually in the shape of the Eye of Elena. And it feels all of the skin is peeling off of Aelin's body. It feels like she is unraveling from the inside, and Dorian pretty quickly realizes that if they continue, this will kill both of them very easily. And Dorian starts trying to stop Aelin, you know how we were going to split this? Just kidding, it's not going to work. But he can't speak in this place, he can't speak. But then there is a voice from behind them that tells him to stop, and it's Dorian's dad. It's the King of Ardalan. And Dorian stops as the man who looks like his father, but also has this humanity and this sorrow. Looks at him this is not the Valg version of Dorian's dad that he knew. This is his real father that he never was able to know. And Aelin is this cannot be stopped. She's literally busy. She does not have time to talk with you, King of Ardalan, her literal actual enemy from book 1. And the king's I know, what can be started cannot be halted. And Dorian's you can't be in here, get out. And the king's didn't you summon me? And Dorian's no, I didn't summon you. Why would I summon you? And the king goes, my boy. And he then turns to Aelin, let me finish this. And Dorian's what? And Aelin is you were not chosen to finish this, King of Ardalan. Nameless is my price, the king said. Aelin went still. Nameless is my price, his father repeated, the warning of an ancient witch, the damning words written on the back of the amulet of Orynth. For the bastard-born mark you bear, you are nameless. Yet, am I not so as well? He glanced between them, his eyes wide. What is my name? This is ridiculous, Dorian said through his teeth. Your name is... But where there should have been a name, only an empty hole existed. You, Aelin breathed, your name is... How is it that you don't have one? That we don't know it? Dorian's rage slipped. In the agony of having his magic, his soul shredded from him became secondary, as his father said. Erawan took it. Wiped it from history, from memory, an ancient, terrible spell, so powerful it could only be used once. Also, I might be his most faithful servant. Even I do not know my name. Not anymore. I lost it. Nameless is my price, Aelin murmured. Dorian looked then at the man who had been his father, truly looked at him. My boy, his father whispered again, and it was love. Love and pride and sorrow that shone on his face. His father who had been possessed as he had, who had tried to save them in his own way and failed. His father who had had everything taken from him, but had never bowed to Erawan, not entirely. Literally, I remember the first time I read this moment, my jaw was on the floor. Oh my gosh, the fact that this man does not have a name. And I didn't notice that, but upon a reread, you cannot help but notice the number of times we call this man the King of Ardalan. We call him Dorian's dad. We never call him by name. Like hundreds of times, I bet, through all of the books. We're like, the King of Ardaleen. The former King of Ardaleen. Even after he's dead, we're like, the former King of Ardaleen, because now Dorian is obviously the King of Ardaleen. And never did I put in my head, oh, this man doesn't have a name, that's so weird. Dorian is chatting with his dad, trying to work through his daddy issues. Which, again, Dorian, I love you so much. Now doesn't feel like the moment. The king is apologizing, and Dorian is like, you ruined everything. I should hate you. And the king is like, let me pay the debt. And Aelin's like, you don't have enough magic. And the king says, I have enough magic to help. And then Aelin and the king make a silent agreement. And Aelin turns to the king and says to him, I had planned to do it before we got to the end. And the king says, then you will not be alone now. His father replied. And then the man smiled at him. A vision of the king, of the father he might have been, had always been, despite what had befallen him. I am grateful that I got to see you again, one last time. Dorian had no words, couldn't find them, not as Aelin turned to him, tears sliding down her face as she said, one of us has to rule. And she just turns and shoves him back through the door back to Aurelia. And she was gonna do it the whole time. She was never gonna let Dorian die. Like, realistically, she only agreed to this plan because, like, she knew it was gonna be, like, the easiest way to get Rowan to agree to, like, not letting her, like, he would have, Rowan, as we know, never lets Aelin do anything. Like, she's responsible for her own self and her own body, but, like, making this easy for her, making this, like, as smooth a process as possible. Because I think otherwise, like, girlfriend would have wound up sneaking away in the night and having to do it by herself, because I think that's what she would have done. She would have waited until Rowan was asleep and left, and then just gone and done it. Ugh, I think those were, like, really the two options. And then Dorian comes back to his body, so we, like, zap back to the Endover salt mines, and Chaol and Rowan have been watching Dorian and Aelin's lifeless body for hours as they, like, have been forging this lock. And this is fascinating to me. I like to imagine this moment. We don't get any information on what was happening before, but, like, both of them are, like, waiting. They're, like, in their most terrified states as their, like, beloveds. Dorian and Aelin are, like, in another world, like, maybe dying, maybe, hopefully, just sacrificing themselves to these, like, eternal magic. And they're just standing there for hours, and these boys do not know each other well. Like, at all. They've had, like, minimal interactions, and honestly, most of their interactions in Queen of Shadow were not nice. Those were not, like, super friendly interactions, and then they had Battle of Enel interactions, and those have been nicer. They both dated Aelin. One of them is now, like, married to Aelin, and one of them now has a new wife, but, like, you know, it wasn't that long ago that he dated Aelin, and I just feel like that would have been maybe some of the most awkward times that could have happened in the world, or those hours that they were just standing there watching. Like, I'm sure they're not, like, spending a lot of time chatting, but did you just stand in silence for all those hours? I don't know. It just seems like the vibes would have been weird. Anyway, Dorian comes back to his body. He tries to, like, grab onto Aelin and go back through the ward gate, but, like, her hand is completely healed, and Dorian's like, no. And Rowan immediately knows what Aelin did. He knows what Aelin did, and he's mad at himself that he didn't think about it, because obviously that's what Aelin was gonna do. But Chaol takes him a second longer. Chaol's like, what happened? And Dorian said, it wasn't enough. The two of us together, it would have destroyed us both. Dorian wept. Yet Damaris somehow summoned my father, and he took my place. He offered to take my place, so she... And Rowan can feel the mating bond thinning. He should have known that if their plan failed, Aelin would never sacrifice a friend. Even for this. Even for her own future. She had known he'd try to keep her from forging the lock if she'd mentioned that possibility. What she would do if it all went to hell. Had agreed to let Dorian help her, only to get herself here. Would have likely dropped Dorian's hand without his father appearing. Over, she had said so many times that she wished for it to be over. He should have listened. Chaol gripped Dorian, and the young lord said to Rowan, softly and sadly, I am sorry. She had lied. His fire heart had lied, and now he would have to watch her die. Okay, bummer. Anyway, back inside the ward gate hallway. Aelin is still working on sealing the lock hand in hand with her enemy. This man who was like that was like the big bad of book 1 and 2 and 3 was the King of Ardaleen. And 4, Queen of Shadow and Air Fire. Like, we are always fighting against this guy. She's thinking through this process and how she had, like, never intended for Dorian to destroy himself. Would have always sent him back to Aurelia as soon as he had given enough. Like, she knew that. And she thinks to herself, this was payment for 10 years of selfishness. 10 years of running away from Terrasen. 10 years of running. Here's where I'm going to take Miss Aelin Galthanius. I'm going to take her hands. I'm going to hold her hand. And I'm going to say, okay, we're in therapy now. Miss Aelin, we are going to go meet an 8-year-old. We're going to go meet an 8-year-old. And we're going to say, okay, the responsibility of an entire kingdom is on your shoulders. Also, your parents have just been murdered. And we're going to say, would we blame them for the choices they made after that? No. And then we're going to, like, go hang out with, like, Evangeline. Evangeline's, like, 11, 12. Would you put all of that weight on Evangeline? Like, you're 19 now. And, like, by the time you're at a place where I feel like we could have even put any level of responsibility on you, 16, 17, we were starting to step into it, okay? I think developmentally appropriate, you did what you're supposed to do. If you had been 40 years old and still putting off going to Terrasen, maybe we could have this conversation. But right now, we can't. And I'm going to need you to go look at a child. Go look at a child and say, oh, we don't blame 8-year-olds. We don't blame 8-year-olds from things that are this heavy, this weighty. You know, we just don't. And she's also thinking about Rowan and how Rowan is never going to be able to forgive her for this. But she had needed him to let her go, needed him to accept it. She would have never been able to do it, to come here if he had been begging her not to. Had he been weeping as she had wanted to weep when she had kissed him one last time. Soon now, the king promised. She found the man smiling. I was given a message for you, he said softly. His edges blurred as the last of his power drained away, but he still smiled, still looked at peace. Your parents they are so very proud of you. They asked me to tell you that they love you so very much. He was near invisible now, his words little more than a whisper of wind. And the debt has been paid enough, Fireheart. Then he was gone. The last of him flowed into the loch, wiped from existence. She barely felt the tears on her face as she fell to her knees. As she gave and gave her magic, her very self. My name is Aelin, Ash River Galitha. A choking scream tore out of her as the last of the loch sealed, as the loch became forged once more. As real as her own flesh. Aelin's magic completely vanished. All of Aelin's magic is gone, essentially, except her water magic. Boo! Tomato, tomato. We'll talk about it later. I, literally hate this so much. But anyway, all of her magic is gone. And then we get the, 12 ghostly, god figures that appear in the portal behind her and are like, hey, remember how part of this was, you were going to send us home? And Aelin is like, for sure. I would like to make a bargain with you first. And the gods were like, no. And Deanna hissed, a bargain? You dare to ask us for a bargain? And Aelin is like, yeah, let's do a trade before we fulfill our ends of this situation. Aelin is like, you've promised to take Erawan's soul with you. Take Elena's soul instead. Leave Erawan to Aurelia. But in exchange, leave Elena. Let her soul remain in the afterworld with those she loves. And Elena starts crying because, TBH, she doesn't deserve that kindness. She's the worst doers. She's had 1,000 years with her love. Sorry, disappear. This is dumb. Sorry, Aelin. I know you're trying to be kind and nice, and this is very much the Aelin we know. Aelin, if given an ounce of power, is going to use it to help those who cannot help themselves. I know this. We love this about Aelin. But in this moment, this was a dumb choice. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, wait, this is the dumbest thing ever, because she thinks she's dying. Spoiler, she's not gonna die. She's not gonna die. But, she thinks she's literally dying. The whole reason that they were doing this now is so Erawan could be destroyed and Terrasen would have a chance. So if she didn't do that, Terrasen would not have a chance at all. This was stupid. The more I think about it, the more I hate it, actually. I didn't hate it until this moment, and I was talking to you, and then I was like, wait a second, I hate this. Elena is crying, and Aelin says to her, she smiled at the ancient queen, the debt has been paid enough, which is, again, so sweet. And then Aelin thinks to herself, she had wanted them to debate it. Her friends had asked for their vote on the gate, not just to ease the burden of their choice, but to hear it from them. To hear them say that they could defeat Erawan on their own. That Yrene Towers might stand a chance to destroy him, so she could make this bargain, this trade, and not seal them entirely to their doom. Sorry, I do think you are. I do think you are. I think even Yrene Towers, who we love, Yrene Towers, #1 fan right over here. If you were going to sacrifice yourself and not actually get rid of Erawan, it does not make sense to do it now. It makes 0 sense to do it now. It doesn't make any sense. Oh my gosh, this is all unraveling right in front of my very eyes. But if your new plan was okay, I'm going to get rid of Erawan, with Yrene Towers, and then I'm going to trade Erawan's life for Elena. Fine. If you want to do that, do it after the battle. Then go defeat Erawan with your own little 2 hands. I guess you don't want the brothers to come through the gate, but you have the keys. Don't give Erawan the keys first. Elena also thinks this is a dumb idea, and she says to Aelin, no, don't do that. And Aelin smiled. You bought me extra time so I might live. Let me buy this for you. Elena covered her face with her hands and wept. No one but herself. She would allow no one but herself to be sacrificed in this final task. Deanna laid her hands on either side of Elena's face. I had hoped for this. And then Deanna grabs Elena's head and explodes her into a million pieces because the gods are the worst, leaving her not even an ember to send back to her mate. We do not make bargains with mortals. Not any longer. Keep Erawan if that's what you wish, and the goddesses stroll out the door. So now Elena doesn't get to stay in the afterworld, and Erawan is stuck with them. This was a lose-lose-lose. And now Aelin's about to sacrifice the last bits of her magic to close the gate, finally. Meanwhile, we get a quick cut to Rowan, and Rowan can feel the mating bond slipping away, and Rowan is holding on for dear life. He's holding on to that mating bond, not letting Aelin slip. Anyway, the goddesses are starting to leave. They're walking into this like lovely little spirit world, and they aren't even going to take Erawan. They're not taking anything with them. And Mala is the last one to go through the gate, and she turns to Aelin and says, seal the gate. Aelin is like, wait a minute. Why am I letting these goddesses get away with this? Like, I am Aelin, mother effing Galathinius. I am a fire-breathing bitch queen. I am Selena Sarthosian, the best assassin in all of Ardalan at the young age of 17. Like, I'm not going to let these girlies get away with this. I don't care if they're goddesses. This is not how we behave when we're talking to Miss Blondie. And I'm glad she remembered that. We're getting a little sniveling. And far, far away, Aelin heard another woman's voice. Make sure that they are punished someday. Every last one of them. They will be, she'd sworn to Kaltain. They had lied, had betrayed Elena and Aurelia as they believed themselves betrayed. Their green, sun-drenched world rippled away ahead, groaning. Aelin climbed to her feet. She was no lamb to the slaughter, no sacrifice on an altar of the greater good, and she was not done yet. And Mala says, okay, do it. And Aelin realizes that Mala can read the thoughts going on in Aelin's head. And Aelin is like, are you going to stop me from what I'm planning? Mala only held out a hand, and in it lay a kernel of white-hot power, a fallen star. Take it. One last gift to my bloodline. She could have sworn Mala smiled. For what you have offered on her behalf, for fighting for her, for all of them. Because remember, Mala is actually Elena's mother. Mala, like, because she's a goddess, has, like, forgotten her connection to Elena. This part confuses me a little bit. I'm not lying to you guys. I'm a little confused. But I think that's why she, like, recognized this kindness from Elena, and she gives her, like, one last gift, this, like, little kernel of power. Because remember, all of Aelin's power is gone except the little bits of water magic she still has from her mother. And then Mala says, when it is done, seal the gate and think of home. The marks will guide you. Mala shows her the image of Aelin's tattoo, and Aelin realizes that Rowan tattooed word marks into those wings that tell the story of Aelin and Rowan's story. It has word marks, like these matching word marks that will guide her home. A map home, Mala said, the image fading to him. He'd suspected somehow that it might come to this, had asked her to teach him so that he might make this gamble. And when Aelin looked behind her to the archway into her own world, she could indeed feel them. As if the word marks he'd secretly inked into her were a rope, a tether home, a lifeline into eternity, one last deceit. Another voice whispered past them. A fragment of memory, spoken on a rooftop and rifthold. What if we go on only to more pain and despair? Then it is not the end. That power flowed and flowed into Aelin, her lips curving upward. It was not the end, and she was not finished. But they were. To a better world, Mala said, and they walked through the doorway, into her own. A better world, a world with no gods, no masters of fate, a world of freedom. And as Mala goes into that portal world, this beautiful world, Aelin smiled and bowed. Far out, striding over the hills, the gods paused. Aelin's smile turned into a grin, wicked and raging. It did not falter as she found the world she sought, as she dipped into that eternal, terrible power. She had been a slave and a pawn once before. She would never be so again. Not for them, not ever. The gods began shouting and running towards her as Aelin ripped a hole in the sky, right into a world she had seen only once, had accidentally opened a portal to one night in a stone castle. Distant, baying howls cracked from the bleak gray expanse, a portal into a hell realm. A door now thrown open. Aelin was still smiling when she closed that archway into the gods' world and left them to it, the sounds of their outraged, frightened screams ringing out. And then Aelin seals the lock with the magic from Mala rather than yielding the last drops of herself. The debt has already been paid enough. She would not give it up. Her innermost self, she would not surrender. They would not take this lingering kernel of her. She would not yield it. She seals the lock. They would not destroy her. They would not be allowed to take this. She would live. She would live, and they could all go to hell. A better world with no gods, no fates. A world of their own making. They would not beat her. They would not get to take this most essential kernel of self, of soul. Once upon a time, in a land long since burned to ash, there lived a young princess who loved her kingdom. Her kingdom. Her home. She would see it again. It was not over. Behind her, the archway slowly sealed. The odds were slim. The odds were insurmountable. She had not been destined to escape this. To reach this point, to still be breathing, Aelin's hand drifted to her heart and rested there. It is the strength of this that matters, her mother had said long ago. Wherever you go, Aelin, no matter how far, this will lead you home. No matter where she was, no matter how far, even if it took her beyond all known worlds, Aelin's fingers curled, palms pressing into the pounding heart beneath. This will lead you home. The archway to Aurelia inched closer. World walker, wayfarer. Others had done it before. She would find a way too, a way home. No longer the queen who was promised, but the queen who walked between worlds. She would not go quietly. She was not afraid. So Aelin ripped out her power, ripped out a chunk of what Mala had given her, a force to level a world, and flung it towards the lock, the final bit, the last bit. And then Aelin leapt through the gate. She was falling and being thrown, the world gate sealed behind her, and yet she was not home. As it closed, all worlds overlapped, and now as she fell through them, one after another, worlds of water, of ice, of worlds of darkness, she slammed through them faster than a shooting star, faster than light. Home. She had to find home. Worlds of light and worlds of towers that stretched into the sky, worlds of silence, so many. There were so many worlds, all of them miraculous, all of them precious and perfect, that even as she fell through them, her heart broke to see them. Home. The way home. But she's going too fast. She knows she's going to shoot past her world. But then she gets to another world. A world of snow-capped mountains under shining stars. Passed over one of those mountains where a winged male stood behind a heavily pregnant female gazing at those very stars. Fae. They were fae, but not of her world. She flung out a hand, as if she might signal them, as if they might somehow help her, when she was nothing but an invisible speck of power. The winged male, beautiful beyond reason, weird time to bring that up, to be honest, snapped his head towards her as she arced across the starry sky. He lifted a hand, as if in greeting. A blast of power, dark power, like a gentle summer night slammed into her, not to attack, but to slow her down. A shield that she tore and plunged through, but it slowed her. That winged male's power slowed her just enough. And then Aelin finally sees Aurelia on the horizon, and she uses her haul to tether her, she uses that tether to Rowan to haul herself towards it. Home. It was not the end. She was not finished. She willed the world to halt, just as the word gate slammed shut with a thunderous crack, all other doors with it. Aelin plunged back into her own body. And as the sun rises, Rowan feels the surge in the mating bond as Aelin is back into their world, and then Aelin collapses back into her body, and Rowan goes to her and he holds her and realizes that she's breathing, and just the tremendous scent of relief. The scent of Dorian and Kale's tears replaced the salt of Endover as Aelin stared up at Rowan and smiled. Rowan held her to his chest and wept in the light of the rising sun. A weak hand landed on his back, running over the tattoo he'd inked as if tracing the symbols he'd hidden there. A desperate, wild hope. I came back, she rasped. Aelin's back in her body and she feels weird. Her power is gone. Only a tiny, tiny ember remains. Not my favorite. She's also given up her human body and now can only exist in fae form. So that also kind of sucks for her. To preserve this piece of her that now formed in her hands, this droplet of water, her mother's gift, what Aelin had saved until the end, had not wanted to part with until the very last dregs of her were given to the lock, to the word gate. Aelin held out her other hand, and the kernel of flame that sputtered to life within it. An ordinary gift. A fire bringer and no more. But Aelin all the same. My notes are just literally a rant about this. And I don't want to super get into it because it really is less about this story and about the larger issue of taking power away from young women at the end of their stories. But I do have a massive issue with it. And I totally understand its role in the plot, okay? I understand the role in the plot. I'm not saying even necessarily that this book needed to allow Aelin to keep her powers, although I would have loved it if it did. But I just want you to know that in my head, she gets to keep her powers. Okay? In my head, I pretend this part didn't happen. In my head, she got all of her powers back. She I don't know. It works, okay? And you know what? Sarah J. Maas just made this book up in her room. What gives her more right to tell me what actually happened in the story? Because someone paid her? No. My version of the story, Aelin gets to keep her magic. And maybe at some point I'll talk about why I find this so troubling and so upsetting in a larger context. Maybe once we've also done ACOTAR, because there's a character in ACOTAR where a similar thing happens and it also grinds my gears and makes me upset. But anyway, we don't really have time to get into it right now. So we're going to keep it moving. Back in Orynth, it's been a week since the 13 made the yield day, which bought them some time. That full next day, Morinth's troops did not try to attack them. But then they did. But then they were back. They rallied. Aelin is meeting up with Lysandra in the morning, as has become their pattern. They've had this kind of sweet little relationship. Lysandra has been grabbing deer to feed the soldiers. She's been going out in wyvern form into the forest, picking up some deer for everyone to eat. Truly doing everything in this novel. But this morning, she, as Aelin on her walk to breakfast, she just leans into him and they hold each other for a moment, and that has been kind of their pattern. After the 13th sacrifice, after their yielding, they've just fallen into this place where it hasn't gone much further than just holding each other these quiet moments, but just the heaviness of the death around them and the hopelessness of what's happening and the weight of just being so exhausted they just like need each other too much to ignore that. It's like very sweet. It's a very sweet little like scene, very tender, very soft. I'm like pretty easily bought. So I know I was making a big stink about Aelin being the worsty worst, but like, you know, be sweet for like 10 pages and I'm okay with you again. Meanwhile, Manon is like trying to like live her life after losing the 13. Like, I can't even look at her without tearing up. Like, every time I like think about Manon and just like the level at which Manon really didn't like, it's not like Manon had a large community, you know, like the 13 were her everything. Like, she had already left her family. And of course she has like the Crocians now, but they're like quite new. Like they're like, she's known them for like a week. Like, they don't know her well, and I don't think Manon is someone who, you know, gets to know people easily. And same thing with like Dorian. One, Dorian's not here right now, but also like, I don't know. Okay guys, this is where the truth comes out. I'm ready to tell you. We're in the last video. I do think Manon and Dorian were like good for each other, and I think their relationship was fun, but I don't see them lasting in the long term. Like, I don't really think they have like a profound emotional bond. And I don't think after what Manon has gone through, her and Dorian are gonna last. Sorry. I know that's rude of me to say. We'll talk more about it later when we get to like the ending parts, but I don't know. Manon just like makes me sad. Like, who is she? Like, who is she supposed to talk to? Like, who is she supposed to like turn to in this grief? She doesn't have anyone. Like, these women, she like ridden with these women for decades, centuries. I don't know how long she'd been. They're like fairly young, but I still think they're kind of old. Like, I think like 150 years. And they're all gone in like this one single moment. It's just like her and Abraxas now. Hold on, let me try not to cry over Manon for no reason. Her and Petra are like working together to like prep things for the witches for the battle today. It says of Manon, her chest, her body had been hollowed out, only moving, going through every ordinary motion kept her from curling up in a corner of this airy and never emerging. She had to keep moving, or else she would cease to function at all. Ansel had approached her at dinner one day and told her like sorry for her loss and like thanked her for the 13th sacrifice, and shared the story of her own troops that were butchered by Orynth. And then Ansel, I'm gonna read you a chunk. Ansel reached for Manon's slice of bread, pulling off a chunk and eating it. We can share it, you know. She's not talking about the slice of bread. The waste. If you can break that curse. Down the long table, some of the witches tensed, but did not look towards them. Ansel went on. I will honor the old border of the witch kingdom, but keep the rest. The queen rose, taking Manon's bread with her. Just something to consider, should the opportunity arise. And then she was gone, swaggering off to her own cluster of remaining soldiers. Manon hadn't started after her, but the offer had lingered, to share the land, to reclaim what they had, but not the entirety of the waste, to bring our people home. I actually think this is incredibly generous of Ansel. Like, her family was killed by the witches. Like, the witches were their like ultimate enemy. And so for Ansel to walk up to Manon and be like, I will share with you. Like, we can share. We can make this work. I love Ansel. I wish we got more Ansel, honestly. I like really do really much enjoy her. Anyway, now in the current moment, she's up on the battlements with Petra, kind of preparing for the day. And Petra is like, you maybe should take the day off to rest. And Manon is like, no one else is resting. And Petra is like, everyone else is sleeping at night, so that's probably why they're not resting during the day. And Manon is like, I do not need to rest. And Petra is like, okay, fine, but like a lot of people are counting on you. Like, lives are at stake, and if you are sloppy because you are tired, everyone will suffer. And Manon's like, whatever. She continues about her business. At the same time, in the castle, Evangeline is still being a messenger for Darrow. She's delivering a message straight from a Crocian witch. And she learns that, like, it's very rare that the Crocian witches will, like, interact with humans in any way. So, like, she knows that, like, she's pretty cool. Essentially, the message is like, hey, a siege tower is coming to the battlements. And she'll be there in a few hours. And Evangeline's like, oh my gosh, is this the same as the witch tower? And Darrow and Murtagh is also there. Murtagh, they're like, no. But, like, it is a big deal. And Murtagh is like, I'm gonna go to the battlements and help. Darrow didn't try to stop him as Murtagh walked off the battlements. Slow. He looked slow and old and frail, and yet he kept his chin high, back straight, as if she had been able to choose a grandfather for herself, it would have been him. Because remember, Evangeline spent those Empire of Storm months that she was separated from Aelin and everyone else with Murtagh. Like, he really truly was like a grandfather like figure. Like, really took care of her for months. Back in Empire of Storms, they know each other quite well. And he's an old man. I know he doesn't look old in his bloomers, but he is. He's an older man. And he's only going out of there because they're already stretched so thin that, like, adding more forces, there's no one else to put out there. And so Murtagh is going out. And she just thinks about how frail and, like, delicate. He looks so delicate as he heads out there. Meanwhile, back with the crew who is making their way to no, they're not making their way to Morinth. They're making their way to Orynth to fight Morath. They go back to camp. Aelin is not a human anymore, and she's trying to, like, grapple with that. And Rowan is holding on to Aelin, like, the whole time. Like, he does not stop touching her even for a minute. And they have some bad news to report. Like, people are not going to be thrilled with the fact that Aelin was able to deal with a lock, which is great. We love that. But they didn't deal with Erawan at all. And also now Aelin has no power. Which, to be honest, is better than Aelin's original plan. Because Aelin's original plan was actually to do almost the exact same thing, except to not come back at all. So I guess she wouldn't know how to deal with the consequences of that. But, like, Bestie, why did anyone think that was a good plan? And by anyone, I mean Aelin. Aelin, the only one who knew about that plan. She really should have just let them slurp Erawan up with them. It really, truly doesn't make any sense not to. Then Aelin thinks to herself. She could still see them. Even walking in silence under the trees, the darkness yielding towards the grayish light before dawn. She could see each and every one of those worlds she had broken through. Perhaps she'd never stop seeing them. Perhaps she, alone in this world, and all others knew what lay beyond the invisible wall separating them. How much life dwelled and thrived, loved and hated and struggled to claw out a living. So many worlds, more than she could contemplate. Would her dreams forever be haunted by them? To have glimpsed them, but have been unable to explore, would that longing take root? So, to all the haters who are like, Aelin just wants to rest in her home in Terrasen. No. Aelin wants to go explore worlds. She wants to! Please let her. If you're confused by that statement, that's okay. If you know, you know. Then, Aelin says to Dorian, hey, sorry about your dad. And Dorian's like, yeah, me too. It was kind of a bummer. And then Aelin, like, notes that Chaol is standing, like, right next to Dorian. At his side, Chaol kept silent, though he glanced at the king every now and again. He looked out for Dorian, as he always had, Aelin supposed. Cute. And then they walk over to Lorcan and Aelin, or Lorcan immediately notices something is different, and that her humanity is gone, that she's just Fae. And Aelin notices that the gods are gone. She can feel the difference. And then Aelin asks Lorcan if he feels any difference, and he's like, no. And then Gabriel's like, what does it mean? As the first rays of sun begin to gild his golden hair, for them to be gone. Is there a hell realm whose throne now sits vacant? That night, we're told about this meeting that, like, went really horribly, but we don't actually see it. But Dorian and Yrene and Chaol are, like, sitting around a campfire talking about it. And Yrene is like, I do not know how she didn't walk out of that meeting and leave everyone to rot. I would have. Like, they were so mean to her. And Dorian is like, never underestimate the power of guilt when it comes to Aelin Galathynius. Like, she will get them in the end. And Yrene is like, she sealed the word gate. The least they could do is be grateful for it. Like, Erawan was preparing to literally bring his brothers and, like, take over the world with the Valgarmy he was going to bring through that word gate. Like, it's a good thing that's closed. And Chaol is like, oh, I have no doubt that they are grateful for that. But the fact remains that Aelin promised one thing and did the opposite. Which is true. And Dorian is feeling for the bottom of his magic, which has, like, a very distinctive bottom now. He did lose a decent amount of his magic in like, forging the lock, but just, like, not nearly as much as Aelin. Yrene is like, yeah, the world was partly saved. That is better than nothing, right? Dorian smiled at that. He adored his friend's wife already. Likely would have married her too if he'd had the chance. I think that's probably true. I think Dorian has fallen in love with every beautiful woman that has crossed his path. And he would happily fall in love with Yrene. Throuple vibes. Dorian, Chaol, and Yrene. I love that for her. She has a little entourage of two boyfriends. I want two boyfriends and I want the boyfriends to be boyfriends. Yrene truly has that situation. It's perfect. You might be like, Manon is busy. And then Dorian says, Aelin and I still have a little magic. We'll figure out a way. He prayed it was true, but there were no gods left to pray to. Meanwhile, Aelin and Aelin are taking a bath. Aelin, like, cooked up a scheme so, like, Rowan could have a minute. Like, Rowan has had a rough day, and he needs to go take a flight. He needs to go fly around. Feel the wind in his feathers. The meeting with the Cognate did not go well. Aelin is not doing well. And she just, like, feels a lot of shame around the choices she made, which, like, to be honest, maybe she should. Sorry, Aelin, you know you are my literal love of my life, favorite character in the Sarah J. Maas world is Aelin Galathynius, but, like, a lot, unless we count Manon, who's close behind. Like, why did you try to save Elena? We love Elena. Not really. Elena's actually, like, so annoying. But even if I didn't think Elena was, like, so annoying, I would still not think saving her, like, a bad time would be worth Erawan. Sorry, it was a bad choice. Aelin is asking questions, as she does. Stay curious, Aelin. Aelin asks the right questions at the right time, I think, for the most part. Where Dorian's just asking questions at the most inopportune moments. And Aelin is like, do you still have any magic? And Aelin is like, okay, well, is your bath warm? Who do you think heated that up for you? Yes, I have some magic. She's like, she explains that it's about 1/10 of the magic she had before. And she's like so well aware of this bottom of her magic. She always like, you know, explained her magic as like this well that was like bottomless, that she had to like dig and dig and dig and search for the bottom for like days. And now she can like, you know, jump down and touch the bottom. And Aelid's like, well, I've never cared if you had magic or not. Aelin says, why? Everyone else did. Aelid says, who you are, is it just your magic? Isn't it? I liked my magic. Loved it. Sarah J. Maas, give her magic back right now and say sorry for taking it from her. She liked it. Give it back. Give it back. I understand she like couldn't have magic for the end to like hit quite as well. Like the like end scene, as we'll get to. Like it hits more because she's not like super overpowered and she's like the underdog in this fight between her and like the forces of darkness. I totally get that. I understand that it makes for a better ending, but couldn't she have, like, give it back? Aelin asks, are you afraid of facing Erawan in battle? Aelin, I'm afraid of not reaching Orynth in time. If Erawan chooses to drag his carcass up there to fight me, I will deal with it. Aelin, and Maeve, what if she arrives with Erawan too? Aelin knows the answer. If Maeve and Erawan show up, they're gonna die. And Aelin is like, so many questions, Lady of Parenth. And Aelin's like, sorry. And Aelin's like, do you now see why I didn't ask you to take the blood oath? And Aelin's like, no, the Fae males challenge you all the time. And Aelin says, yes, but I like having you not bound to me. I didn't plan for any of this. A soft sigh. For what? To survive the lock, the gate, to actually have to rule, to live? I'm in uncharted territories, it seems. Aelin slips Silba's ring off her finger and tries to give it to Aelin. So remember, Silba's ring. Let's do a quick refresher on Silba's ring. So we saw this ring first in Airfire. It was in that frozen lake with the swamp water. So I don't think the water was swampy. I think the water was frozen. There was a big monster that came out. They got the ring there. They took that ring to Maeve. Maeve thought she was getting that ring back when she traded like Rowan for that ring. That's when Lorcan came and looked for her. Lorcan was trying to get the ring from her, trade in from her. Eventually he did steal the ring from Aelin. Then Lorcan took that ring from Aelin and he gave it to Aelin to protect Aelin against the Valg. Now Aelin is giving it back to Aelin. And Aelin says, why? Because between the two of us, you're more likely to face Erawan or Maeve. Aelin didn't reach for it. I'd rather you'd keep it. I'd rather you had it. Aelin challenged, holding the queen's stare. She asked softly, haven't you given enough, Aelin? Won't you let someone do something for you? Aelin glanced down at the ring. I failed, you realize that, don't you? You put the key back in the gate. That's not failure. And even if you had failed in that, I would still give this ring to you. I owe it to your mother to see that you survive this. Aelin's chest tightened. You owe it to my mother to live, Aelin. She leaned closer, practically pushing the ring into Aelin's face. Take it. If not for me, then for her. And Aelin takes the ring and says, thank you. Then Bort comes in. Bort comes in the room and Bort is like teasing. Bort is like such a delightful time. I love Bort. Bort comes in and is like joking around with them. Aelin feels weird because they're like literally naked in a bath, but Bort doesn't seem to mind and is like, hey, a northern storm is coming in. And a northern storm is like a really big deal because it actually means like a ton of snow is coming and it's going to impede their journey onward. So the next day, they actually have to spend the entire day at camp. The Rookin cannot fly because there's so much snow. And Nesrin's hanging out in the Cognate tent, obviously, because she's dating Sardak. So she has to. And Kashin is like, we need to keep going north. And Hasar is like, we really don't have another option. We've already come this far. Like, we can't like turn around now. And Nesrin thinks about how weird it is that she's chilling with the royal family and supposedly going to be Kashin's empress. Like, Kashin is like, you're going to be my empress when I become the emperor, right? Or the Khan. And Nesrin's like, okay, weird. Yeah, she just is kind of confused. Not confused. She knows exactly what's going on, but she's like a little overwhelmed by it all. Sartak continues. Our people have faced odds like this before. We will face them again. We keep going, all the way to the walls of Orynth. We swore as much, and we do not renege on our promises. Nesrin would have fallen in love with him for that statement alone. She leaned into him, savoring his warmth. In silent thanks. Let us pray, Kashin said, that the storm does not slow us so much that there is nothing left of Orynth to defend. Okay, cute. Meanwhile, in Orynth, we find out that Murtagh had died that day on the wall. He'd fallen. He'd gone down to the battlements to hold off those Valg soldiers that had the siege tower, and he died. Aedion is holding the vigil with Ren, because remember, Ren is his grandson, I believe. And Evangeline had cried when they pulled Murtagh off the wall, and as they were walking him through the street, she had gone down to him and she'd kissed him on the brow as he'd been carried. But she's already been put to bed for the night. She's not at this vigil. His death, they'd learned, had rallied the men at the wall, made them topple that siege tower. A lucky, costly victory. They leave Ren there, and Lysandra and Aelin head to the dining hall, and Aelin starts crying. I should have been at the western wall, he said, voice breaking. She knew no words would comfort him, so she wiped Aedion's tears again, tears he would only show in the shadowed hall. After all, others had found their beds, and when he still didn't meet her stare, she cupped his face, lifting his head. For a heartbeat, for eternity, they stared at each other. She couldn't stand it. The bleakness, the grief on his face couldn't endure it. Lysandra rose on her toes and brushed her mouth over his, a whisper of a kiss, a promise of a life when death hovered. She pulled away, finding Aedion's face as distraught as it had been before, so she kissed him again, and lingered by his mouth as she whispered, he was a good man, a brave and noble man, and so are you. She kissed him a third time, and when this war is over, however it may end, I will still be here with you, whether in this life or the next. And then they make out in the hallway, and they almost get caught. Like, low-key, they sort of do get caught by, like, people walking by, and Lysandra's like, we'll continue this tomorrow. And Aedion, because he loves to ruin a moment, goes, was this from pity? And Lysandra is like, no, it is because I am sick of all this death, and I needed you. There's, like, a meeting of everyone in charge in this, like, war council to kind of, like, discuss the plans for the day. They have 3, maybe 4 days worth of arrows and, like, weapons in their arsenal before they run out. And Aedion's like, okay, what about food stores? And Darrow's like, those are much stronger. We have about a month worth of food. And Rolf's like, also the fire lances are also going to give out tomorrow. So we're going to be out of arrows, the, like, sword. I don't know. Do you run through swords? I don't know. They're going to be, like, out of weapons almost entirely tomorrow. And Manon's like, okay, we need to conserve as much as we can. And especially those fire lances, those are only for higher ranking Valve that make it over the city walls. Like, we can't be using those fire lances to, like, shoot at anything farther. Like, those are a last ditch effort. And as Manon is talking, we get a glimpse into Manon's mind. It was an effort not to look at the sealed doors to the chambers, where Astrid and Sorrel should have been, waiting, defending. Instead, Petra and Bronwyn stood there, not as her new second and third, but as representatives from their own factions. And they go through everything they have in their arsenals, and they're like, essentially, best case scenario, we can maybe hold Orynth off for 5 days. And then it'll be over for us. And Aedion says, okay, but we fight to the very last of us. To the very last one. Like, we are not going to give up, even if things are not looking super hopeful. Back with this group, the snow has stopped their progress entirely. They are, like, totally stuck. They're still a week out from Orynth. They know things are going bad in Orynth. Rowan is still trying to kind of, like, figure out how much power Aelin has left and what that is going to mean for her if she's forced to face Maeve and Erawan. And they, like, discuss that the storm could, like, continue for another day or two and probably dump, like, 3 feet of snow. And Aelin is like, I can melt as much as I can to try to, like, clear us a path. And, like, before she could have just, like, melted their path entirely. She could have just, like literally had flames over the army the whole way there, no big deal. But, like, that would exhaust her. She would be, like, totally burnt out by all of this to, like, try to melt the snow as they walk. But, like, she might be able to do it with her and Rowan, like, Rowan using his air magic to kind of, like, move that warm air. And Gavriel is like, if that's not going to be comfortable for the army, they're going to be exhausted, you're going to be exhausted. By the time we get to Orynth, we're not going to be that helpful. And Fenris is like, they're professionals, they can handle it. And they discuss, like, alternate routes, they discuss other options, but, like, nothing actually sounds like it's going to be helpful or get them there any faster. And Aelin is just, like, really struggling with this new reality of her body and her magic. Like, it doesn't feel comfortable anymore. She had, like, really grown comfortable with this, like, large sum of magic that initially felt foreign, and had grown really comfortable with, she'd spent most of her time in Fae form, but, like, to still have that human form inside of her. And so to, like, feel just, like, this very strong sense of, like, just, like, discomfort in her own body at the same time, this anxiety over what's happening in Terrasen and how she can't do anything to help. First her scars, then her mortal human body. Enough. She had given enough. And Rowan knew she planned to give more. And then a Rookin scout barges into the tent and is like, look, you must come. There's something crazy happening out there. Come on out. Let's take a look. And they go out and they see the white stag, the Lord of the North, with just, like, a ton of little folk around its feet. And the little folk beckon Aelin forward. The others gasped in silence at the magnificent, proud stag who had come to greet them, to guide home the Queen of Terrasen. But then the wind began to whisper, and it was not the song that Rowan usually heard. No, it was a voice that they had all heard as it streamed past them. Doom is upon Orynth. Heir of Brandon, you must hurry. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold skittering down Rowan's skin. The storm, Aelin blurted, the words swallowed by the snow. You must hurry, we will show you the way, swift and unseen. Aelin only stilled. Said to that voice, as ancient as the trees, as old as the rocks between them, you have already helped me so many times, and you have given much of yourself, heir of Brandon. We who remember him know he would have made such a choice had he been able to do so. Oakwald shall never forget Brandon, or his heir. What is your cost? Aelin asked, her voice louder. the voice of Oakwald, of the little folk and the creatures who had long cared for it. A better world, the Dryad replied, at last, even for us. And then the army is like racing to get packed up and ready because they're going to follow the Lord of the North all the way up to Orynth. And Aelin runs back to their tent to that stack of books from the southern continent. And Rowan is like, hey, girlie, we got to get going. What are you doing? And she's like, a stupid cow I might be. I skipped over this part, but Hussar called her a stupid cow in that meeting with the cognate. She muttered, rotating the book to show Rowan the page she saw, but not without options. Rowan's eyes danced. You're including me in this particular scheme, princess? Aelin smirked. I wouldn't want you to feel left out. He angled his head. We need to hurry then. That was an eyeball combo. I don't think I mentioned that. Obviously, they said that with their eyes. Back in Orynth, we're going back and forth a little bit. Erawan's troops we're kind of getting like a little recap of what's been happening. Erawan's troops have been stopping every night, not because they can't fight in the dark, like the Val do not need light to see, but because when they win, they want like a total surrender. Their weapons had finally run out. It's been 5 days, so like a little longer than anticipated. We love Slay, and everyone is headed back to the castle to rest because tomorrow they're gonna die. Great. Aelin announces that they are also out of arrows for the archers. Rolf says fire lancers are gone. Like, we are out of weapons. Aelin and Lysandra have been snuggling and making out every night, and they realize that tonight's probably going to be their last. So that's a bummer. At the same time, Evangeline is out on the battlements with Darrow, and maybe she's up in a tower. I don't know. Towers, battlements, they're all the same to me. And the bone drums of Erawan's troops are being beat, which normally they stop at night, but it's very clear that everyone's kind of aware that, like, we're on the last legs, the dregs of this battle. And Lord Sloan, one of the other lords, says, tomorrow it will be done. Evangeline knows that does not mean victory. Evangeline is like, what will happen at the end? Darrow says, either we surrender and Erawan makes slaves of us, or we fight until we're carrion. Evangeline, who shall decide what we shall do? Darrow, it would fall upon us, the lords of Terrasen, but what would you decide? I should have very much liked to live at Caravere, Evangeline admitted. She knew he did not recognize it, but it did not matter now, did it? Murtagh showed me the lands, the rivers, the mountains right nearby, the forest, the hills. An ache throbbed in her chest. I saw the garden out by the house. I would have liked to see them in spring. Her throat tightened. I would have liked for that to be my home. For all of Terrasen to have been my home. Darrow said nothing, and Evangeline set a hand on the castle stones, gazing to the west now, as if she could see all the way back to Alsbrook and the small territory in its shadow, to Caravere. That's what Terrasen has always meant to me, you know, Evangeline went on, speaking more to herself. As soon as Aelin freed Lysandra and offered to let us join her court, Terrasen has always meant home, a place where the sort of people who hurt us don't get to live, where anyone, regardless of who they are and where they come from and what their rank is, can dwell in peace, where we can have a garden in the spring and swim in the rivers in the summer. I've never had such a thing before, a home, I mean. And I would have liked for Caravere for Terrasen to have been mine. She chewed on her lip. So I choose to fight until the very end for my home. As new as it is, I choose to fight. Obviously, I'm sobbing. I bet you're sobbing. Maybe you're not. Confusing. Anyway, Darrow, also moved by that speech, because he also has a heart, takes Evangeline down to the Great Hall where Lysandra and Aelin are getting dinner. And Lysandra smiles up at Evangeline, and Evangeline knows that Lysandra's going to try to get her out. Like, Lysandra will find a way to get Evangeline out of there. But she knows also that Lysandra won't come with her if it comes down to it. Darrow gives Aelin the sword of Orynth back to him. Darrow had held it between him, the ancient bone pommel gleaming, and he says to Aelin, Terrasen is your home. Aelian's haggard face remained unmoved. It has been since the day I arrived here. Like, what do you mean? And Darrow says, I know. Darrow said, gazing at the sword, and you have defended it far more than any natural-born son would ever have expected to be, beyond what anyone might ever be reasonably asked to give. You have done so without complaint, without fear, and have served your kingdom nobly. He extended the sword. You will forgive a proud old man who sought to do so as well. Aelin slid his arm from Lysandra's shoulder and took the sword in his hand. Serving this kingdom has been the greatest honor of my life. And then Darrow tells Lysandra that he's formally recognizing that Caravere is going to be a territory and that Lysandra will be its lady. For your unwavering courage in the face of the enemy gathered at our doorstep, for all you have done to defend the city and kingdom, Caravere should be recognized and shall be yours forevermore. Any heir you shall bear shall inherit it, and their heirs after them. Evangeline is my heir, Lysandra said thickly, resting a warm hand on her shoulder. Darrow smiled. I know, that too. But I shall like to say one more thing. On this perhaps final night of ours, he inclined his head to Evangeline. I never fathered any offspring, nor did I adopt any. It would be an honor to name such a wise, brave young lady as my heir. Absolute silence. Evangeline blinked and blinked again. Darrow went on in the stunned quiet. I should like to face my enemies, knowing that the heart of my lands, of this kingdom, will beat on in the chest of Evangeline. That no matter the gathering shadow, Terrasen will always live on in someone who understands its very essence without needing to be taught, who embodies its very best qualities. He gestured to Lysandra. If that is agreeable to you. To make her his ward, and a lady. Evangeline clasped Darrow's hands. He squeezed back. Aye. Lysandra blinked and then turned to her, eyes bright. It is not my call, is it? So Evangeline smiled up at Darrow. I would like that very much. So Evangeline did it. She won over Darrow. Now we get to check in on Manon. She's probably having a bad time, if I had to guess. The bone drums beat all night. Manon's sleep is like sleeping in the area with Abraxas, and she knows that tomorrow they will fall. She would not be able to see her people home, to bring them to the wastes. I would have liked to see it, Manon said quietly. The wastes, just once. Even with the darkness squatting on the battlefield, she could picture it, the rolling, vibrant green that flowed to the thrashing gray sea, a shining city along its shore, witches soaring on brooms or wyverns in the sky above it. She could hear the laughter of witchlings in the streets, the long-forgotten music of their people floating on the wind, a wide, open space, lush and evergreen. I would have liked to have seen it, Manon whispered again. Okay, next day, Lysandra is in wyvern form, and this, I do have a note here, because I had this thought while I was in this chapter. Do you think Lysandra can, like, chat with Abraxas when she's in wyvern form? Like, do you think they can have, like, full conversations? I hope so. I hope they can chat, and I hope they have chatted. Anyway, dawn breaks over the plains, and Morath immediately starts shooting this volley of arrows, and shot down like a bunch of the witches, and blood rained over the battlefield. Like, things are really bad immediately. The siege ladders are going up faster than they can take them down. The witches, the like Iron Teeth, the bad Iron Teeth witches are being like super aggressive, scary. Manon is like very quickly realizing that they will be overrun within the matter of hours, and like honestly, she's like a little bit annoyed that the 13 gave up their lives for this. She's like, the 13 sacrificed themselves and we're gonna lose? Embarrassing. And Manon makes the call that the witches should fall back behind the city lines. Like, it is just too dangerous for them to be out there. They're going to be more helpful on the walls, like, being, like, a last line of defense, rather than being so spread out. The western gate is shaking under Morath's troops as they hit it with a battering ram. And Aelin realizes that it's going to fall soon. After thousands of years, it would finally sunder. Everyone is fleeing to the castle. They've got hours left. Lysandra runs over to Aelin and is like, tell me where to have the witches stationed in the city. Like, where should we go? Aelin doesn't answer because he's thinking about the best place to go die a song worthy of a death, which is his obsession. He's obsessed with getting a song after him. I'll write him a song. Okay, he doesn't need to, I don't know how to write a song, but I'll figure it out for Aelin. I'll write him a quick little ditty and then he can move on with his life because he's like a little too obsessed with this. But then Aelin leaned in and kissed Lysandra, kissed the woman who should have been his wife, his mate, one last time. I love you, he said. Okay, that is so great and so sweet, but like she did have a question and you did just ignore it. So like if you could answer her question and also profess your love, that would be perfect. Sorrow filled her beautiful face. And you. She gestured to the western gate to the soldiers, waiting for its final cleaving. Until the end, Aelin hefted his shield, flipping the sword of Orynth in his hand, freeing the stiffness that had seized his finger. I will find you again, he promised her, in whatever life comes after this. Lysandra nodded. In every lifetime. And hand in hand, they head down to their desks at the gate when a horn sounds. And it is not Moranth's horn. A line of golden armored warriors, foot soldiers and cavalry alike, more and more and more, a great line spreading across the crest of the final hill, filling the skies, stretching into the horizon, flew mighty armored birds with riders, rooks, and before all of them, swords raised to the sky as the horn blew one last time, the ruby and the blade's pommel smoldering like a small sun. Before them all, riding on the Lord of the North, was Aelin. Yay! They've arrived! They made it! We get a little recap of how they got there. They traveled through the forest for 5 days. They did not send rooks ahead because they wanted that element of surprise. And that makes sense. Aelin loves nothing more than a dramatic surprise. The forest, like, literally made a path in front of them. Like, the trees parted. The snow melted. Like, roots dissolved into the ground as they, like, traveled through these days. They traveled through the night yesterday, and when dawn had broken, the Lord of the North had knelt beside Aelin and offered himself as her mount. There would be no saddle for him. None would ever be permitted or needed. Any rider he allowed on his back, Aelin knew, would never fall. Some had knelt when she rode by. Even Dorian and Kale had inclined their heads. And they emerge onto the plains, and immediately they can see the city in wreckage. The Crocians fight at the city walls, Gabrielle observed. Indeed, Aelin could barely make out the red cloaks. Manon Blackbeak had not broken her vow, and neither would she. Aelin glanced at her hand, hidden beneath the gauntlet, to where a scar should have been. I promised you that no matter how far I go, no matter the cost, when you call for my aid, I will come. And there would be no time for speeches, no time to rally the soldiers behind her. They were ready, and so was she. And so they descend onto the battlefield and they start fighting. The rooks start to like intercept the arrows as they're shot at them. They like snatch them out of the sky. The rooks start going down pretty immediately. And Manon rallies her witches, who, remember, they were stationed on the city wall. They rally the witches to kind of like protect the rooks against the other witches because they're like, more defenseless against the wyverns. But they're like more agile so they can deal with the arrows. Leaving Orynth wide open for the Golden Army as it slammed into them with the force of a tidal wave. They're fighting. Bort has taken up a position to defend Aelin, particularly with Euron and Falcon assisting on like kind of protecting Aelin from above. And the odds are still against them as they brace for Erawan and Maeve's arrival. But like they're making a dent in thing. And Rowan is fighting alongside Fenrys and Lorcan, and they're thinking about how they are brothers fighting for their home. They're fighting for Terrasen together, and how different it feels than when they fought for Maeve, because they're fighting for something they believe in. Aedion's like, oh my gosh, yay! Aelin's here. Also, Kale did gather that army. Yay! And like, in fact, Kale did not gather that army. Nezrin and Yrene gathered that army, but Kale was there. So, close enough. The western gate is still at risk of falling, and Aedion's like, okay, well, glad Aelin's here. I'm gonna go die now. Kisses to Lysandra, and Lysandra's in wyvern form going to help people. Dorian and Kale are just two bestie bros fighting in a battle, and the men of the Wild Fangs are fighting with them. Dorian had never seen battle, knew he never wished to again. The chaos, the noise, the blood, the horses, the screaming, but he was not afraid. And Kale, riding near him, breaking soldiers between them, did not hesitate, only slaughtered onward, teeth gritted. Look at this growth from Kale. Remember book 1 Kale was so concerned about murdering someone, and now book 8 Kale is like murdering people left and right. We love character growth. And being okay with murder. Dorian spots Manon above him, but he doesn't spot the rest of the 13. Obviously. Aelin is also cutting people up. She is using the training that had been instilled for her for the past 10 years. She had been an assassin long before she had mastered her power. There was no hardship to fall back on these skills. To let Goldrin draw blood, to engage multiple soldiers and leave them bleeding out behind her. I have a quick question. Is being an assassin the same as being a soldier? Because I just feel like they're not exactly the same skill set. Like, I am, whatever. Aelin can be the best at everything. I'm fine with it. That's not a problem for me. But it just seems like those might be slightly different skill sets. We're going to pretend they're the same now. It's like gross and bloody. They're fighting. There's more details. Nobody cares. Somebody probably cares because Sarah wrote it. But like, we're going to kind of skip through some of the battling. This crew is kind of like slowly moving towards Orynth's gates to kind of like join with the forces that are there. But then a wyvern comes for Aelin, and the rooks scatter, and Aelin tries to hit it with wall of flames, but she doesn't have enough magic to like completely like dissolve the wyvern. And Aelin uses her magic to protect the stag, and then cuts off the wyvern's head as a wyvern with emerald eyes comes to her defense. So Lysandra sneaks up behind her and bites off the wyvern's head, and it gets rid of the witch, and then shifts into a ghost leopard. And the ghost leopard leaps on her, and Lysandra says, well met, my friend, as she hugs Lysandra. And Lysandra's so glad to see her because, again, they didn't even know she got rescued from Maeve. Like, she could still be there for all they know. Oh, so gorgeous, so fun. And then a horn sounds from Orynth, a call for help, and Aelin turns to Lysandra and says, shall we? And so they start heading that direction, and meanwhile, Rowan is like, hey, we need to stay close to Aelin. She's sneaking off by herself again. That's not what he says, but, like, we need to stay with Aelin to fight with her. But the bros are fighting with him, Fenrys and Lorcan, and he can see from where he's standing that Aelin, the stag, and Lysandra are headed for the western gates. And he's watching as Aelin starts to move the catapults that set up at the base of the gate. Well, Aelin threw herself at the rungs, letting the catapult's wheeled base, and it began pushing it, turning it away from Orynth, from the castle, precisely as Aelin had told him Sam Cortland had done in Skulls Bay. The catapult's mechanism allowed her to rotate its base. Rowan wondered if the young assassin was smiling now, smiling to see her heaving that catapult into position. Ugh. I would have loved if we would have gotten like a quickie, so fast Sam moment when Aelin went to that like word gate hallway. Just like a so fast one. Just like seeing his little smiling little face. I also love that Rowan thinks of Sam in this moment and thinks of the fact that like Sam would be proud of her. I just like think it's sweet. I think the relationship that Rowan has like with the memory of Sam is like, I don't know, just really precious. It warms my heart. Anyway, Ansel's fighting on one of the siege towers against people. Aelin then brings down the siege tower with a catapult. Ansel is able to escape before the siege tower comes down. And then Lysandra, now in wyvern form, brings down the catapult right on the spot where Aelin was. But Aelin is fine, don't even worry. Nesrin and the crew are fighting with the wyverns in the sky. And then they see a second force coming from Perenth. Yikes, scary, spooky. At the same time, the army finally breaks through the western gates that they've been trying to all day. The boys try to hold the line, but it doesn't work. Like, immediately, like, all these Orynth men are flooding through the wall. Darkness shrouded everything as a second force full of Valg princes come into the city. And Aiden knows he has to get this gate shut. That, like, if this gate is open, like, it's over. But then, Daddy Gabriel shows up to help. He holds off a few of the guys and gives the Bane a minute to, like, reform the line. "Are you hurt?" Aiden's father asked him, his first words to him. Aiden managed to lift his head. "You found Aelin," was all he said. Gabriel's face softened. "Yes." And she sealed the word gate. Aiden closed his eyes. At least there was that. "Erawan? No." And then Gabriel is like, "Okay, Aiden, you need to go rest." And Aiden is like, "I can't. We need to go shut this gate." See, this is happening like while they're like at the gate. Like, look around, Gabriel. Now's not the moment. And then Gabriel says to him, "Then we shall shut them," Gabriel said, smiling grimly together. The word was more of a question, subtle and sorrowful, together. As father and son, as the two warriors they were, Gabriel, his father, had come. Looking in those tawny eyes, Aiden knew that it was not for Aelin or for Terrasen that his father had done it. Together, Aiden rasped. Not just this obstacle, not just this battle, but whatever would come afterwards. Should they survive this, together? And Aiden could have sworn something like joy and pride filled Gabriel's eyes. Joy and pride, sorrow, heavy and old. And then Aiden makes a spot for Gabriel in the Bane's formation. He's like, "Okay, Daddy Gabriel is going to help us out, so scoot over, make him a little space. I want him to stand next to me." Then he looks back and his father's on the other side of the gate. Like, he's not closing the gate from this side. And Gabriel, like, pushes all these soldiers back through the gate and then turns to Aiden and he says, "Close the gate, Aiden." And the men start to close the gate. They start to steal it behind Gabriel. And Aiden is running, trying to find a way to get to his father, but, like, he can't. And he then runs to the top of the wall to see if he can spot him. And he watches as Gabriel's throat is ripped out by the men. Like, there was just too many of them. And Aiden's kind of annoyed because he really thinks that Gabriel could have done it by staying on this side of the gate. Like, he really could have, like, not sacrificed himself, and it probably would have also been fine. Meanwhile, back in the larger battle scheme, Rowan spots Aelin and Ansel heading to the southern gate, and then Rowan finds Gabriel's body. Then Rowan says to Gabriel, "I hope you found peace, my brother. And in the afterworld, I hope you find her again." Meaning Aiden's mom. And he grabs his body and brings it into the city. Each step a memory of his friend, an image of the kingdoms they had seen, the enemies they had fought, the quiet moments that no song would ever mention. Yet the songs would mention this, that the lion fell before the western gate of Orynth, defending the city and his son. If they survived today, if they somehow lived, the bards would sing of it. And Rowan brings his body to Aiden, who was like, he could have stayed on this side of the gate. Like, I don't know why he did this. But then Aiden, like, rights himself. He's like, "Okay, we've got bigger fish to fry. We have more we need to do." And goes back into general mode, and he says, "We need to prepare for the second part of this battle," Aiden said hoarsely, "or we won't last the night." And they receive word that the new Valg forces that are headed their way have 20,000 men and lots of Valgs. Lots of them are Valg. And they also have 6 spiders, which we know are the Valg princesses. Cut to Chaol and Dorian. The boys are inside Orynth right now. They've been fighting together all day. Chaol's back is starting to give out, and he's not sure if it's because Yrene's power is running out or because he's been fighting too hard. But he, like, really needs... Like, TBH, it's confusing to me why he hasn't already needed a cane. But, whatever. Him and his bestie bro, the power friendship have kept him afoot. Morith is coming quickly. Cut to Ansel and Aelin. They're taking a break and getting tended to by the healers. They're resting outside at the city walls. And then Aelin is going to go home again. She's going to walk into Orynth for the first time since she was 8 years old. And strangely enough, Dorian was also in the city that day, but not yet. She chucks Ansel on a horse so Ansel can get the help she needs. Ansel is, like, pretty badly wounded, and she heads out the other way. They have a plan, we're told, but the southern gates close, and she starts looking for Rowan in the skies. Aelin shut her eyes for a heartbeat, put a hand on her chest, as if it might steady her, prepare her for what squatted in the approaching darkness. Still, Aelin remained there for a long moment, just beyond the gates to her city, her home. Still, she pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the heart thundering beneath, feeling the dust of every road she had traveled for those 10 years to return here, for this moment, for this purpose. So she whispered it to herself one last time, the story, her story. Once upon a time, in a land long since burned to ash, there lived a young princess who loved her kingdom. Yrene and Aelin are healing inside of the city, but then they hear this like rush of soldiers fleeing back into the city walls, and they go to talk with Darrow to see like kind of what's happening, and they find out that there is another army marching towards the city with the Car and Cooey on like the front lines. And Yrene starts to worry because she hasn't seen Chaol in a long time. But we know Chaol is at least alive because remember, they have a death pact. So if Chaol was dead, Yrene would also be dead. So right now, so far so good. And then Lysandra arrives in the wall and announces that Aelin and Rowan have ordered everyone who can evacuate to evacuate. Because as they look out into the army, they realize that Erawan and Maeve are marching with the army, which is bad news bears. And Aelin asks, is there a way out of the city, some sort of back door through the mountains that could take the children that the elderly and the children could take? And Darrow says none that will allow them enough time to escape. Like, it's too late. Like, we can't evacuate now and successfully get everyone out. Sandra's like, okay, well, tell us about it anyway because we have to get Evangeline out of here. And Evangeline is like, look. And they look over the wall. And there she was, in the deepening blues of the descending night, amid the snow beginning to fall. Aelin Galathinius had appeared before the sealed southern gates, had appeared before Erawan and Maeve, her hair unbound, billowed in the wind like a golden banner, a last ray of light with the dying day. Silence fell. Even the screaming stopped as all turned towards the gate, but Aelin did not balk. Did not run from the vowed queen and king who halted as if in delight at the lone figure who dared face them. Lysandra let out a strangled sob. She has no magic left. The shifter's voice broke. She has nothing left. Still, Aelin lifted her sword. Flames ran down the blade. One flame against the darkness gathered. One flame to light the night. Aelin raised her shield, and flames encircled it too. Burning bright, burning undaunted, a vision of old, reborn once more. The cry went down the castle battlements and through the city, along the walls. The queen had come home at last. The queen had come to hold the gate. Her name was Aelin Ashriver Whitethorn Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. Maeve turned to the vowed king. Shall we then? But Erawan looked at Aelin and hesitated. She would not have long, not long at all, until they realized that the power that made him hesitate was no more. But she had not remained outside the southern gate to defeat them, only to buy time. For those in the city she loved so greatly to get away, to run, and live, to fight tomorrow. She had made it home, and that was enough. The words echoed in every breath, sharpened her vision, steeled her spine. A crown of flame appeared atop her head, swirling and unbreakable. She could never win against both of them. But she wouldn't make it easy, would take one of them down with her, if she could, or at least slow them enough for the others to enact their plan, to find a way to either halt or defeat them, even if either option seemed unlikely, hopeless. That's why she remained here, to give them that slim shred of hope, that will to keep fighting at the end of this. If that was all she was able to do against Erawan and Maeve, she could go to the afterworld with her chin held high. She would not be ashamed to see those she had loved with her heart of wildfire. Aelin turns to Erawan and is like, hey, we've met a few times, but I don't think we've ever been formally introduced properly. It's so funny that we like met so many times and you didn't realize it was Aelin and I didn't realize you were Erawan. Anyway, I kind of miss Duke Parrington. He was like kind of fun. This is like a cute little outfit that you got on, but like I miss Duke Parrington a little bit. And Erawan is like, it is kind of like super crazy that we were both in Rifthold at the same time and like did not recognize each other. And Aelin is like, yeah, I think it was probably fate, like, because this is actually way more fun, don't you think? Like, this is more dramatic, this is grander, like, this is a dual, like, fit for, like, who we are as people. It would have been weird if we, like, you know, knifed each other in the castle hallway. You know, this is much better. And Maeve's like, okay, enough, why are you guys bantering? What? And Aelin arched a brow. I've spent the past year of my life, 10 years if you consider it another way, building to this moment. She clicked her tongue. Forgive me if I want to savor it. To talk with my great enemy for longer than a moment. And Aelin is like, by the way, the keys are gone. Did deal with that earlier this week, so hate to break it to you, the keys are gone. And Erawan is like, I know. And Maeve's like, we end this now. Aelin goes, one would think that you were afraid, Maeve, of any sort of delay. Aelin turned to Erawan once again. The gods had planned to drag you with them, to rip you apart. I asked them not to, so that you and I might have this grand duel of ours. Also, I did want to ask Erawan, the funny thing is, like, did you know that Maeve is, like, literally plotting to take you out with an army of healers? She has a bunch of them in Dornell. She's hiding them from you. Also, did she mention that, like, she helped Dorian steal that last word key? I think she pretended, like, oh no, Dorian took the word key. But, like, she did help him steal it. No, she didn't mention that. And Maeve's like, obviously she's lying to you. She's trying to get you to turn against me. I didn't do that. And Aelin is like, am I lying? Shall I repeat some of the things you said in your most private meeting with Lord Erawan? Here are the things that King of Ardalan told me. And Erawan's like, oh my gosh, Aelin, you've always had a flair for the dramatic. Perhaps you are lying, as my sister claims. And they go back and forth, and Aelin is trying to buy them more time with all this, like, taunting. She says, maybe I've got a whole army worth of healers hiding in that city. Maybe I've got Silba's heir waiting to kill you, actually, in there. We will never really know, will we? Unless you try it. Maeve stepped forward. I hope you are entertained by your prattling idiocy. Eternally so, Aelin said with a mocking bow. I suppose I'll be more entertained when I wipe you from the face of the earth. She sighed skywards. Gods above, what a sight that will be. Maeve extended a hand before her, darkness swirling in her cupped palm. There are no gods left to watch, I'm afraid. And there are no gods left to help you now, Aelin Galathinius. Aelin smiled, and Goldrin burned brighter. I am a god. And she unleashed herself upon them. Do I think about that line at least once a week? Yes. There are no gods left to help you now, Aelin Galathinius? I am a god? She has no power left. She's just a 17-year-old girl. We're back in Selena Sarthothian mode. And you know what? She's correct. She's not lying. Rowan is running for his wife, who snuck off again and is trying to sacrifice herself again. And he's like, boys, we gotta go help her. Fire burst beyond the walls, bathing the city in gold. She couldn't have more than an ember. Against Erawan and Maeve, she should already be dead, yet her flame still raged. The mating bond still held strong. And Rowan is like, okay, we go help her. But then he hears the sounds of the innocent and dying behind him, back in the city, and he turns to the city. She would never forgive him for it if he walked away. So Rowan angled his weapons, turned towards the screaming. We swore an oath to our queen and this court, he snarled, sizing up the soldiers pouring over the wall. We will not break it. But even they can't really put a huge dent in Orynth's forces, but they're able to, like, hold things off a little bit. Meanwhile, the girlies are watching this all play out over the battlements. Aelin and Darrow. The girlies and Darrow. Aelin is sacrificing herself to buy them time, but she won't be able to defeat them. Only Yrene would be able to do that. Then, Alid and Yrene hatch a little plan, and they're taken over to Dorian and Chaol, where they're hanging out on a different spot in the battlements, and Lysandra's in rook form. And Chaol is like, get back in the castle! He's stressed that his girlie's on the battlements while everything is about to go down. Although he's on the battlements, and we know that if he dies, then she dies. So he's like, they're like, they sometimes act a little weird where they're like very worried about the other, but like, you guys should be worried about each other equally. Like, take care of yourself if you want to take care of your partner in this situation. Yrene completely ignores Chaol and his whining, as you should. You know, anxious boys sometimes need to be ignored. And she turns to Dorian and says, we need you. And Dorian is like, she has nothing left, talking about Aelin. Alid quickly, succinctly explained their reckless, mad idea, the Lady of Parents idea. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Alid and Aelin are such powerful schemers that they can plot their schemes separately and have them work together in unison. Alid is a powerful, powerful schemer. Don't you forget it. Chaol dropped his sword and shield to the bloody stones and gripped Yrene's face between his hands. You can't, he said again, voice breaking. You can't. Yrene put her hands on top of Chaol's and brought them brow to brow. You are my joy, was all she said to him. Her husband, her dearest friend, closed his eyes. The reek of Valg, blood, and metal clung to him, and yet beneath it, that was his scent, the smell of home. So Chaol at last opened his eyes, the bronze of them so vivid, alive. Utterly alive, full of trust and understanding and pride. Go save the world, Yrene, he whispered, and kissed her brow. Yrene let that kiss sink into her skin, a mark of protection, of love that she carried with her into hell and beyond it. Chaol turned to where Dorian sat with Alid atop the shifter, the love on her husband's face hardening to something fierce and determined. Keep her safe, was all Chaol said. Perhaps the only order Yrene realized he would ever give his king, their king. That's why she loved him. Why she knew that child in her womb would never spend a single moment wondering if it was loved. Dorian bowed his head. With my life. Then the king offered a hand to help Yrene onto Lysandra's back. Let's make it count. I'm so proud of Chaol. We're just going to take a second for me being so proud of Chaol and being, like, trusting and, like, letting go of his anxiety. Also, I love this moment in which he gives, like, one order to his king, and it's to, like, keep his wife safe, which is good because they're in a throuple now. In my brain, they're in a little bitty throuple. My sweet, anxious boy. I love him so much. Then we get this Lorcan moment. Lorcan glanced at the castle, where he knew Alid was watching. He said his silent farewell, sending what remained of his heart to the wind, the woman who had saved him in every way that mattered. Then Lorcan ran for the gate, to the dark queen who had threatened all he had come to want, to hope for. He'd come to hope, had found there was something better out there, someone better, and he'd go down swinging to defend it all. Back out on the battlefield, Aelin is fighting with Maeve and Erawan. It was a dance, and one that Aelin had spent her entire life practicing. Not just the movements of her sword, her shield, but the smirk she kept on her face as she met each blast of darkness. As she realized over and over and over who her dance partners were. Where they advanced a step, Aelin set out a plume of fire. Didn't let her own doubt show. Didn't dare wonder if they could tell that the fire was mostly just light in color. And Aelin realizes that, like, they really would have no use for her now that the keys are gone and her power is also gone. And so, like, they're gonna kill her. As soon as they figure it out, she's dead. And Maeve is like, wait a second. For a god, you don't seem so willing to smite us. And Aelin's like, symbols are, like, very powerful, Maeve. I, like, cannot kill you too quickly. Aelin drew up every shred of swaggering arrogance and winked at Erawan. She wants to see me wear you down. Wants to see me tire you so those healers up in the castle can finish you off with little trouble. Maeve's like, stop! She keeps trying to pit us against each other. Do you not see what she's doing? And Erawan glances up and is like, oh my gosh, there are healers in that castle. And Aelin says, straight from the Torsesme. Erawan hissed at Maeve. If she has spoken true, you are carrion. And then an Ilkin comes up from behind and snatches Erawan up into the sky, leaving Aelin and Maeve alone. Just us, Maeve said, lips curving to that spider smile, the smile of a horrendous creature that launched themselves at Orynth. Aelin lifted Goldred again. That's precisely how I wanted it, she said. Truth. But I know your secret, Heir of Fire, Maeve crooned and struck again. And Yrene is up on this tallest tower shooting off this, like, beacon of bright healing magic. Here I am, the power sang through the night. Here I am. And then Erawan is going to get dropped off. I think this is funny. Every time the Ilkin, like, carry people to fly around, I just can't imagine it any way but silly. Like, I just feel like a grown man carrying another grown man around in this way, like, and, like, flying. It just looks silly every time. It looks silly every time I picture it in my head. I can't picture it not silly, you know? Anyway, he gets dropped off. Back on the battlefield, we have Aelin and Maeve facing off. And Maeve says to Aelin, I never thought you'd do it, you know. Her dark power coiling around her as Aelin panted. A cramp had become low in her back and now lashed its way up her spine, down her legs. That you'd be foolish enough to put the keys back into the gate. What happened to that glorious vision you once showed me, Aelin? Of you in this very city, your worshipping masses, crying your name. Was it simply too dull for you to be revered? What a disappointment that deep down you wished to be so ordinary. The queen who was promised is no more, Maeve said, clicking her tongue. Now that you are nothing but an assassin with a crown and a commoner's gift of magic. Maeve glanced at the blazing sword. Clever of you to imbue the sword with your own gifts. No doubt done before you yielded everything to the weird gate. Maeve stalked forward, her dark hair and robes billowing. You have denied me two things, Aelin Galathinius. The keys I sought. Another whip of power sliced for Aelin, her flames barely deflecting it this time. And the great duel I was promised. And then Maeve slips into Aelin's head. Wake up, Aelin, Maeve whispered. Aelin blinked and found herself in the iron box. Maeve leaning over her, open lid, smiling. We're here, the Fave Queen said. You've been dreaming, Maeve said, running a finger over the mask, still clamped to Aelin's face. Such strange, wandering dreams, Aelin. And Aelin is trying to remember that the battle is real, that this is not real, but the battle is real. She's trying to hold it in her head, but it's so hard because everything over those past few months starts to feel like a nightmare that didn't actually happen to her. And Maeve says, what will you say, niece? Will you spare yourself? Yield to me? And then that voice inside of her says, you do not yield. And Maeve continues on, like, promising her freedom, promising her a way out, and promising her this freedom that, like, Aelin has always wanted. Isn't that what Aelin has always wanted? Freedom from this responsibility, from this burden. And Aelin's trying to remember the oaths. She had sworn an oath to Terrasen, to Nehemia, to Rowan, and she reminds herself this is not real. And then Maeve calls for Karen, and immediately Aelin starts shaking as Karen walks into the room. Karen ran a hand over the rim of the coffin. I broke some part of you, didn't I? I name you Alentia, a spirit that could not be broken. Aelin traced her metal-encrusted fingers over her palm, where a scar should be, where it still remained, would always remain, even if she could not see it. Nehemia who had given everything for Elwë. And yet Nehemia had still felt the weight of her choices, still wished to be free of her burdens. It had not made her weak, not in the slightest. The spirit that could not be broken. You do not yield. She would endure it again, if asked. She would do it. Every brutal hour, every bit of agony. And it would hurt, and she would scream, but she'd face it. Survive against it. Arabin had not broken her. Neither had Endover. She would not allow this waste of existence to do so now. Her shaking eased, her body going still, waiting. Maeve blinked at her, just once. A breath, sharp and cool. She did not want it to be over, any of it. Aelin made herself look. To face down that place of pain and despair, it would always leave a mark, a stain on her. But she would not let it define her. Hers was not a story of darkness. This would not be the story. She would fold it into herself, this place, this fear, but it would not be the whole story. It would not be her story. And she kind of sits up in the coffin. She doesn't allow the space to dissolve immediately. She sits up in the coffin, and Maeve says, "How? You should have known better. You who feared captivity and did all of this to avoid it, you should have known better than to trap me. Should have known I would find a way." And Maeve says, "How did you not break?" "Because I am not afraid," Aelin said. "Your fear of Erawan and his brothers drove you, destroyed you, if there was anything worthwhile to destroy." And Aelin is going down swinging, and she's backing Maeve into a corner. She's actually doing pretty good against Maeve, but then all of a sudden a lead appears, and Aelin dives for a lead to protect her, but it's just an illusion. A lead didn't wander out into the battlefield. She's not a dummy. And Maeve is able to use that moment to snatch Aelin. And Maeve's got Aelin by the throat. And she says to her, "Here's what will happen, Aelin Galathinius. You will swear the blood oath to me, and then you and I will fix this mess you've made. You and the King of Ardalain will fix what you have done. You may be Firebringer no longer, but you still have your uses. You may be asking yourself why I'd even think you'd ever agree to it, what I might have against you. The very things that you seek to protect, that's what I shall destroy, should you defy me. What is most precious to you, and then when I have finished doing that, you will kneel." But then Aelin feels the wind kiss with snow. Rowan, he's here. The boys are there, and then they immediately start fighting Maeve, and her darkness tries to swallow them. Maeve's power swelled, the ice and wind stopped, the other magic within the darkness stopped, just like it had been swallowed, and then they began screaming. Rowan began screaming. Okay, Aelin literally didn't have any power left at all. I know her sword had power in it, she didn't have power left at all, and she lasted longer than this. Boys, this is embarrassing. I understand that they were trying their best, and they've had a busy, rough day, but it's a little embarrassing that you guys literally got here, and she got you immediately. And then it's time for our bestie Erawan's evil villain monologue. Okay, are you ready? He goes, "Do you know how long I have looked for you? Do you even know what you can do? How do you think we made the keys in the first place? In my world, your kind exists too. Not healers to us, but executioners, death maidens, capable of healing, but also unhealing, unbinding the very fabric of our lives, of worlds." Erawan smirked. "So we took your kind, used them to unbind the word gate, to rip 3 pieces from its very essence. Maeve never learned it and never shall. It took all of them to hew the keys from the gate, every one of the healers amongst my kind. But you, with your gifts, it would only take one of you to do it again. And with the keys now returned to the gate," another smile, "Maeve thinks I left to kill you, to destroy you. Your little fire queen thought so too. She could not conceive that I would want to find you before Maeve, before any harm could come to you. And now that I have you, what fun you and I shall have, Yrene Towers." But then Erawan gets stuck. He can't move. There is a word mark traced onto the ground, and I do believe it is the one that they used to trap Miss Manon back in Queen of Shadows. We love that for them. And Yrene is like, "Tricked ya, I'm not Yrene," and then then she shifts into Dorian, and then the real Yrene arrives in the talons of Roxandra, which is what we're going to call Rook version of Lysandra. And then a lead arrives, and Lysandra shifts into Snow Leopard form. And Dorian is using his magic, which he can also use healing magic now. Dorian actually has access to all the magics. Don't know if you know that, but that's what's happening. To encircle Erawan. Erawan screamed, but the sound was nothing compared to what came out of him as Yrene reached for him. Hands like burning stars, and slammed them upon his chest. The world slowed and warped, and yet Yrene was not afraid. Not afraid of the blinding white light that erupted from her, searing into Erawan. He arched, shrieking, but Tamaris held him down, that ancient blade unwavering. His dark power rose, a wave to devour the world. Yrene did not let it touch her, touch any of them. Hope. It was hope that Chaol had said she carried with her. Hope that now grew in her womb for a better future, for a free world. It was hope that had guided 2 women at opposite ends of this continent 10 years ago. Hope that had guided Irene's mother to take up that knife and kill the soldier who would have burned Yrene alive. Hope that had guided Marion Lockin when she chose to buy a young heir time to run with her very life. 2 women who had never known each other. 2 women who the world had deemed ordinary. 2 women, Josephine and Marion, who had chosen hope in the face of darkness. 2 women, in the end, who had brought them this moment, one shot at a future. For them, Yrene was not afraid. For the child she carried, she was not afraid. For the world she and Chaol would build for that child, she was not afraid at all. And Yrene is literally unmaking Erawan, ripping him apart from the inside out, and she is brighter than the noontime sun, it says, with this light that she is shining into him. And Erawan is trying to worm his way into her thoughts, but she is too powerful. Erawan screamed, The power of creation and destruction, that's what lay within her. Life giver, world maker. Bit by bit, she burned him up, starting at his limbs, working inward. And as Irene's magic starts to like fade and give out, Yrene holds out her hand and Dorian cuts her hand in his hand, and they become like Coronum, which we were told back in Air of Fire was like a very rare thing. So glad this worked for them. I also do think this is really helping with like the throuple vibes between Dorian, Chaol, and Yrene. I think they're going to be a gorgeous little throuple together. I think it'll be so much fun. Dorian says to Erawan, "Tell me his name. My father's name. You took it. Give it back." And Yrene is like, "Does it matter?" Hey, Dorian, does this matter right now? Glad someone is asking Dorian, because like truly right now we are literally trying to shred Erawan, and you're like, what was my dad's name? And I understand that was like so cruel for Erawan to take it, but it does seem like this is not a priority. And Dorian is like, "Yes, it matters." Yrene is like sweating. She cannot hold on to this much longer. And apparently we've entered the Q&A portion of the evening, and she's like, "Could we really like wrap this up?" But then Damaris kind of like forces Erawan to tell the truth. And Erawan says, "It is your own." Erawan's eyes widened as the words came out of him, as Damaris drew it from him. But Dorian did not marvel at the sword's power. His father's name, Dorian. "I took his name," Erawan spat, writhing as the words flowed from his tongue under Damaris's power. "I wiped it away from existence, yet he only remembered it once. Only once. The first time he beheld you." If that doesn't get you right in the guts, I don't know what will. Yrene finishes ripping Erawan up and reaches the little shriveling creature at his core. Yrene shows him an image of her mother, and wishes she could show him an image of Elid's mother too. Two mothers whose love for their daughters and hope for a better world was greater than any power Erawan might wield, greater than any word key. And then he turns to ash and blows away in the wind. Okay, now we're in Rowan's head. Rowan is having this little dream. She was dead. Aelin was dead. Her lifeless body had been spiked to the gates of Orynth, her hair shorn to her scalp. And Rowan's at the gates, looking up at her body, and then Lyra comes up to him and is like, "Hey, this is your fault, just like it was last time." And then Lyra continues, "You would pick her over me?" Lyra demanded, her chestnut eyes filling. "Is that the sort of male you have become?" Then we snap to Fenris, and Fenris is on the veranda back in Doranel. And Connell is like, "Everything that happened to me is because of you." And then Connell continues to like be a whiny baby and be like, "I can't believe you chose Aelin over me." Okay, sorry, Connell, you made like terrible choices, and sometimes we have to let our family go, even if we love them so much, when they're like, you know, enslaved to an evil lady by choice. Like, make at least one nice choice before we can be nice to you. I just like cannot find it in my heart to be like care about Connell. Sorry. Anyway, Aelin's watching the boys have a bad time, and Maeve's Valg powers are like fully revealed now. She also feeds on this despair. We saw this in Air Fire when like Aelin first encountered the Valg. They can like turn your brain into like your worst case scenario. And Aelin's out of magic entirely. There's like no way to help them. She doesn't know what she's gonna do. Then we get Lorcan's bad place, which is like the sweetest. I'm gonna read you the whole thing. "You are nothing." Elid stood before him. The lofty towers of a city Lorcan had never seen. The city that should have been his home, beckoning on the horizon. The wind whipped her dark hair, as cold as the light in her eyes. "A bastard-born nobody," she went on. "Do you think I would sully myself with you?" "I think you might be my mate," he rasped. Elid snickered. "Mate? Why would you ever think you were entitled to such a thing after all you have done?" It couldn't be real. It wasn't real. And yet that coldness in her face, the distance, he'd earned it, deserved it. Okay, that was mean. I can't believe I didn't like that. Anyway. And then Maeve, back to Maeve. Maeve is like, "Oh my gosh, so sad that Gavriel died." At least he died nobly. Like, they're totally gonna sing songs about him, so that's good news. And this like kind of hits Aelin, because this is the first time she's heard about Gavriel's death. Maeve is like, "Oh, you didn't know? Sorry. Yeah, he's dead. But like, there was nothing you could have done to save him. But you could save these boys. These boys that are standing right here in front of you. You could save them." And Aelin uses this moment to chuck a sword at the queen. And Maeve just like ducks out of the way. But Aelin uses that ducking moment to throw the last embers of her flames at the boys. She like throws it as like a brand on all of them. She hits all of them and burns them. Just kind of rude. The burn hits Rowan in the shoulder right as Lyra is like continuing to berate him for being like a lesser male and that he deserves this. The pain angers him back to Aelin. His hands curled at his sides. Aelin, who had known suffering as he did, who had been shown peaceful lives and still chosen him, exactly as he was. For what they both had endured, illusions, those had been illusions. And he like is able to come back to Aelin and to his body. Lorcan too gets the burn on his shoulder, but he doesn't find it grounding. He finds it annoying. He says, "What the heck is burning my shoulder? I'm very busy pining after Elid, even as she tells me I'm a worthless slob, worthy of nothing. I'm a scrub." But still busy pining after her. And he like slips into a different pace. The scene shifts and Elid is an old woman lying in a bed. her withered hand reaching for his, an aged hand riddled with marks, the delicate blue veins intertwining like the many rivers around Darnell. And her face. Her dark eyes were filmy, her wrinkles deep, her thinned white hair white as snow. This is a truth you cannot outrun, she said, her voice a croak. A sword above our heads. Her deathbed. That's what this was. And the hand he brushed against hers, it remained young. He remained young. Life was pain, pain and joy. Joy because of the pain. He saw it in Aelid's face. In every line and age mark, in every white hair, a life lived together. The pain of parting because how wonderful it had been. The darkness beyond thinned. Lorcan dug his hand into the burning wound in his shoulder. Aelid let out a hacking cough that wrecked him. Yet he took it into his heart, every bit of him, all that future might offer. It did not frighten him. Meanwhile, Fenris is ready to jump to his death off the balcony. He's like, I deserve that. Except actually, jumping to my death might not be might be too easy of a death. And he's actually like, glad when his shoulder starts burning because that he like is like, oh my gosh, burning alive actually would be like a good way to go. Jumping off the balcony, too easy. Burning alive on my shoulder might be a good way to go. Back to Maeve. Maeve is like, what was that supposed to do? Were you trying to save them or shield them? Like, you just burned their shoulders. That, like, really wasn't helpful. But then Aelin looks over and Rowan's wiggling his little fingers as a signal that he's, like, with her. What a waste, Maeve said, turning back to them. For these fine males to leave my service only to wind up bound to a queen with hardly more than a few drops of power to her name. But while Maeve isn't looking, Aelin grabs Rowan's hand and they join hands. And then they use their Corona powers to hit Maeve. Maeve hisses, her dark power massing again. Rowan Whitethorn does not have enough the brute power that you once did. Perhaps he doesn't, Lorcan said from a step behind them. But together we do. And beyond us, Aelin said, sketching a mark through the snow with the blood she'd spilled, her blood and Rowan's. I think they have plenty too. And she draws these word marks to open a portal that she had found in those books from the southern continent. It opens this portal to the Oakwood Forest where there's a bunch of fae there. And these fae were the fae that were in Terrasen when magic disappeared. And some of them were trapped in their wolf's forms. And they joined up with this wolf tribe. And that's where they have been. Also, some of them are from the southern continent. And they don't love Maeve, obviously. Also, they have been like trained to kill the spiders because the guys from the southern continent were like the Karnkui, bad news. Aelin explains. I told them I'd deal with you myself, Aelin said, and Rowan chuckled. But the spiders are all theirs. I think they've been waiting a while for it, actually. The Iron-Tooth Witches, too. Apparently, Yellow Legs aren't very kind to those trapped in their animal form these 10 years. But Fenris is still trapped in his head, and Aelin is, like, trying to get to him, and she tries using the blood oath. She says, hey, look at me, like using that blood oath. Look at me. And she's blinking in their code. She's blinking to him. I am here. I am with you. And Maeve keeps prattling on about how she's a vowed queen and eternal as the sea and Aelin will never be able to defeat her, blah, 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 blah. But Aelin's not really paying attention because she's really worried about Fenris. And Fenris starts to hear the blood oath tugging on him from that dark place where he's trapped, and he knows he's not alone. He knows his queen is with him. And he can see the real world finally. And he blinks back to Aelin. Yes. And then Aelin tells him the plan with her eyeballs, obviously. Aelin looks over at Rowan. Together, they burst into flame. And Maeve's attacking them with her darkness, but Lorcan is attacking her with his death magic from the other side. And Aelin says above the roar of the flames, I'd say that you haven't wronged us the most at all. But he has a score to settle. Fenris, does, winnows. He, moves places as he could do. Takes the sword and jams it into Maeve's back. Because apparently he got back his, teleporting abilities. He could not use them to save Lorcan. It made him too sad to even think about. But he can use them to kill Maeve. Okay, again, I just think we could have tried to use them to save Lorcan. I understand this is, a more important moment, and I'm glad they're working now. But, we could have tried to use them for Lorcan. Anyway, we stab Maeve through the heart. And Maeve is like, okay, quick idea. She's not dead yet. She's laying on the snow in her blood. And she's like, quick idea. What if, instead of killing me, you just banish me to another world? Whatever world you want. And Aelin is like, you came here to escape a husband you did not love, a world you did not love. Yes, Maeve breathed. And you love this world. You love Aurelia, Maeve answered. Yes, in the way I can love anything. Aelin, if I chose to banish you, you will go wherever it is we decide and never bother us or any other again? Yes, Maeve snapped, grimacing at the immortal blade piercing her heart. The queen bowed her head, panting, and took Aelin's outstretched hand. Aelin drew closer, just as she slid something onto Maeve's finger and whispered into Maeve's ear, then go to hell. Aelin slips Silba's ring onto Maeve's finger because that ring poisons Valg. So remember, way back in Air Fire, when Maeve wanted that ring back, she wanted that ring back because she didn't want someone else to have that power, not because she wanted to use that ring against the Valg, because she's Valg. And then she looks back at Lorcan, Rowan, and Fenris, and they're like, do it. And then she chops Maeve's heads off. And then Lorcan is like, burn her. And I think Aelin does. She gets burnt up. Then all the Valg on the battlefields behind them fall to their knees. They just drop. And in that moment, Aelin knows that Erawan must be gone too. So Aelin wrenched her sword free of the pile of ashes that had been Maeve. She lifted it high to the night sky, to the stars, and let her cry of victory fill the world. Let the name she shouted ring out, the soldiers on the field in the city taking up the call, until all of Orynth was singing with it. Until it reached the shining stars of the Lord of the North gleaming above them, no longer needed to guide her way home. Yrene, Yrene, Yrene. And then we cut to Chaol, and he's waking up on the bottom of these stairs as, like, someone touches his face, and he thinks to himself, he knew that touch, would know it if he were blind. He passed out because Yrene literally used all of her magic. She was, like, completely out of it. So not only could he not stand, but he, like, could not even be awake. But he hears the cheering of his wife's name, and he does not hear a single bone drum. Chaol gaped at her, as it hit him exactly what had happened, why that surge of power had happened, what this remarkable woman before him had done. For they were calling her name, the army, the people of Orynth were calling her name, and he was glad he was sitting down. Even if it did not surprise him one bit that Yrene had done the impossible. Chaol slid his arms around her waist and buried his face in her neck. It's over then, he said against her skin, unable to stop the shaking that took over, the mix of relief and joy and lingering phantom terror. Yrene just ran her hands through her hair, down his back, and felt her smile. It's over. Yet the woman he held, the child growing within her, Erawan might have been over, his threat and army with it, and Maeve with it too, but life, Chaol realized, was just beginning. Then we cut to Nesryn, and Nesryn watches as, like, the Valg army collapses around her, and she lands, and her ruck has, like, a big scratch near her eyes, and she's, like, calling for a healer, and Sartak comes over and is like, oh my gosh, are you hurt? And she's never seen him look that panicked. But she can't even find words to explain that she, like, needs the healer for her ruck and not for herself, because she's so relieved and just, like, amazed at what has happened. And as the army begins to chant Yrene's name, and then Sartak turns to her and is like, you know what this means? This victory means we are going home, and you are coming with me. And then Aelin and her boys start to make their way back inside slowly, kind of, like, really taking their time to make sure the Valg don't come back to life. But they don't. They're going to, like, deal with all the people with rings and collars in the morning and heal who they can. And they head back to Orynth. All the Iron Teeth have fled also. Because the Iron Teeth didn't collapse, obviously, at the death of Erawan. But, like, they were so outnumbered that they were just like, bye. So the bad Iron Teeth have left, obviously. Finally, she approaches the city gates, and she washes them with her flames. She has enough flame. We keep being like, Aelin is completely out of magic this time. Oh, she's out for reals. And then she does, like, a little bit more. And she does a little bit more. She, like, washes the walls with her magic. She just, like, burns the whole city up for a second and, like, burns all the blood and guts away. Rowan's fingers tightened around hers, but she did not look at him as they crossed the threshold, passing through the gates. No, Aelin only looked at her people, smiling broadly and freely as she entered Orynth. And they began to cheer, welcoming her home at long last. After the battle ends, Aelin finds his father's body, where it has been taken to a room, like, deep in the castle, and just kneels down next to him. And Lysandra finds him shortly after and kneels next to him as well, as they, like, hold vigil over Gavriel until the flame burns out. Together they knelt there, and he knew that her grief was as real as his. Knew her grief was for Gavriel, but also for his own loss. The years he and his father would not have. The years he'd realized he'd want to have. The stories he wished to hear. The Mael he wished to know and would never know. And they just stay there together in silence until the candle burns out. Then they go out to the streets, and they start making out on the streets, as one does after you win a war. That's that famous photo. Making out on the streets. But they're interrupted from their makeout session by a random man. This random man goes, hey, are you Lysandra? And Aelin is about ready to cut this man up. But it's Falcon! And Falcon, like, explains the whole story and about how he's actually her uncle and how he met Nesryn, and he's come back to her, and, like, he didn't know who to look for because he didn't, like, think about the fact that if she had shapeshifted, she would be trapped in a form that looked nothing like, you know, his brother that he'd lost. And he explains that, like, he's actually, like, super, super rich. He has, like, a grand fortune as a merchant, and it's hers to inherit if she would like. Whatever you wish, Falcon said, and you shall never want for anything again. And Lysandra says, I already have everything I need. Maybe you didn't know, but I'm actually best friends with the queen, so, like, I'm doing pretty well. Meanwhile, Dorian's chilling on the balcony, pondering things, which is never good. Dorian should not be allowed to, like, have reflection time. That's just, like, it doesn't work well for him. He will always come to, like, the weirdest conclusions in his brain. And he's thinking about Erawan, even though he knows he should go help with the cleanup effort. He's, like, mostly thinking about Erawan. I think he's actually up on that tower where they, like, killed Erawan. And he's thinking about his father. Erawan had done this, slaughtered and enslaved so many, so he might see his brothers again. He wanted to conquer their world, punish it, but he had wanted to be reunited with them. Millennia apart, and Erawan had not forgotten his brothers, longed for them. Would he have done the same for Chaol? For Aelin? Would he have destroyed a world to find them again? I don't know if he thinks this is a good thing or a bad thing. And here's my thought, my answer to Dorian's question. I don't think he would. He definitely wouldn't for Aelin. Aelin is actually, we don't like Aelin. I wonder how Aelin's doing in the aftermath of the Valg being killed, because weren't we worried about Aelin being evil because he was part Valg? Is he dead? I don't know. Oh, I can't think about Aelin. Aelin confuses me as a plot detail in the story. I try to ignore it as best I can. Do I think he would have destroyed worlds for Chaol? No. I think he'd go look for Chaol a little, but I don't think he'd destroy worlds. Sorry to Dory. I just don't think he would. I do think Chaol would destroy worlds for Dorian. Like, without question, I think Chaol would destroy worlds for Dorian. Without even thinking about it. Anyway. And then he's holding his sword, and he's trying to get his sword to tell him if he's human. Like, it's a magic 8-ball, and the sword is, like, staying quiet. And Dorian's like, I guess it doesn't really matter anymore. Like, I know that. Sword knows that. We all know this. And Dorian has been kind of obsessed with this question in this book, and I just don't really get it. Because, like, he knows people who are not entirely human. Manon's not entirely human, and, like, he's besties with her. He loves Manon. Does he love Manon? Like, I'm in love with you, Manon? But he, like, really likes her as a friend. He likes kissing her. He thinks that she's a good lady. And I, like, understand wanting to know if you're, like, human or not, but also I really feel like it doesn't really matter. Like, Dorian is fixated on it for no reason. But speaking of Miss Manon, she arrives on the balcony, and she says, "Hello, Princeling," she breathed. A smile bloomed on his mouth. "Hello, Witchling." He scanned the skies beyond her for the 13, for Astron Blackbeak. Undoubtedly roaring her victory to the stars. Manon said quietly, "You will not find them. You will not find them in this sky, or in any other." And Dorian just hugs her, and Manon allows herself to be held in this moment. And as Dorian's holding her, she just says, "I miss them." Ugh. It's a different day. I forgot how much, and I just, like, did not allow myself enough time to record, because I forgot how much happened at the end of this book. Like, the battle's over, and we still have, like, a lot to get through. They're walking up the castle steps, and Darrow and Evangeline are waiting for Aelin on the castle steps. And Aelin, because remember her last interaction with Darrow was not ideal, not great, she assumes that Darrow is there to once again be like, "Get out of here, you false queen." She's like, let's get this over with, this, like, embarrassment of Darrow being like, no. But Evangeline is, like, tugging on his sleeve as if he's reminding him of something. And Darrow says to Aelin when she reaches the top of the steps, "My young lord and I were told that when you went to face Erawan and Maeve, your magic was heavily depleted." And Aelin responds, "It was, and shall remain so forever." Darrow shook his head. Why? Not about her magic being whittled to nothing, but why she'd gone to face them with little more than embers in her veins. "Terrasen is my home," Aelin said. It was the only answer in her heart. Darrow smiled, just a bit. "So it is." He bowed his head, then his body. "Welcome," he said, and added as he rose, "Your Majesty." But then Aelin looked to Evangeline, the girl still beaming. "Win me back my kingdom, Evangeline." Her order to that girl all those months ago. And she didn't know how Evangeline had done it, how she had changed this old lord before them. Yet there was Darrow, gesturing to the gates, to the castle behind him. Evangeline winked at Aelin, as if in confirmation, and Aelin just laughed, taking the girl by the hand, and led that promise of Terrasen's bright future into the castle. I'm obsessed with this. I love the fact that even Evangeline, like, contributes to their victory in this, like, pretty important way in winning over this lord. And yeah, we just, again and again, every single act of kindness that Aelin has paid, and, like, making sure that Lysandra and Evangeline are safe, is, like, paying forward itself tenfold. And then Aelin is back inside of her childhood home, like, this place that she has not been inside of since her parents were alive. Like, they fled the palace to, like, their country home, and that's where they were murdered. And so, like, she has not been back here since her parents have been alive. And the palace is kind of in disarray. It hasn't been well cared for in the years that she's not been here, but still, like, it's her home. And there's, like, this weird sense of, I'm sure, like, coming back to this place that she hasn't been in since she's 8, and she sees Aelin for the first time as she, like, walks in the door, and she hugs him. This is the first time they've seen each other since she was kidnapped. So they reunite, and Aelin is obviously still grieving his father's loss that happened a few hours earlier, and Aelin is like, "I'm so sorry about your father," and she asks to be taken to Gabriel. She's taken to, like, the room where they're holding Gabriel's body, and she says to Gabriel, "I wished to wait to offer you the blood oath until after your son had taken it. But I offer it to you now, Gabriel. With honor and gratitude, I offer you the blood oath. Let the world know that you are a male of honor, that you stood by your son in this kingdom and helped to save it. You are blood sworn to me, and you shall be buried here as such. Thank you. Because if you recall, Gabriel offered to give her the blood oath at the same time she gave it to Lorcan, but she was like, no, Aelin was going to get too bent out of shape about this. We're going to have to wait. And so she's like retroactively giving it to him. She like cuts her hand in his hand and like does the whole thing, so he can be buried with like the highest honors as someone who died to save their kingdom, her kingdom, and his son's kingdom. I love it a lot. And then she leaves and lets the boys say their goodbyes. She lets Lorcan and Fenris and Rowan say goodbye to Gabriel, because obviously these men have been fighting alongside each other for years, and Lorcan and Rowan were traveling with him for months looking for Aelin, and yeah, I think there's definitely like a lot of loss there as well. And as she begins to leave, she begins to sing the ancient morning words of Terrasen, which we've heard her sing to Nehemia as well. Something that we've been told is like kind of highest honors. Like in order, when these ancient fae morning songs are sung in Terrasen, it is only for those who are like dying in the highest of honors. And we know that Aelin like reserves these songs for like her beloved dead. We saw her sing them for Nehemia, and I think to some extent we saw her sing them for Sam like years later in Airfire. She does go and sing at the very end of Airfire as well. Meanwhile, Aelin and Manon see each other for the first time. Aelin has been helping Yrene in the Great Hall, like with all of the healing that needs to be done in the aftermath, and she's working with like a group of witches, and Aelin has been checking every single face she sees for like her witches for the 13, and she hasn't seen any of them, and then she spots Manon and she runs over to her and like immediately knows. Aelin saw the sorrow on her face before she reached her, the dullness and pain in her golden eyes. She went still. Who? Manon's throat bobbed. All of the 13, all of those fierce, brilliant witches gone. Aelin put a hand to her heart, as if it could stop it from cracking. But Manon closed the distance between them, and even with that grief in her battered, bloody face, she put a hand on Aelin's shoulder. In comfort, as if the witch had learned to do such things. Aelin's vision stung and blurred, and Manon wiped away the tear that escaped. Live, Aelin, was all the witch said to her before striding out of the hall once more. Live. The Manon stuff is going to get me every time. It's going to get me every single time. She doesn't have really anyone besides 13. They were like her family, and now she's just like alone to deal with this like tremendous loss. And I just like worry for her. Like I just worry for her a little bit. I mean, Aelin wasn't like particularly close to 13, but she did like love the 13 in a way, and they like had saved her multiple times, and like Manon did care for Aelin. We like know this. And this is like their only interaction they have, and I'm a little underwhelmed by like how much space we get in these end pages. I would have loved a little bit more Manon and Aelin time. Just saying. Aelin kind of after that goes to find Lorcan, and we do get one of my favorite scenes in the book, so that's good news. Lorcan is downstairs still kind of keeping watch over Gabriel's body, holding vigil over him, and Aelin had been down there earlier and had cried over this man who had showed her so much kindness. As if we recall, Gabriel and her kind of became buddies when they were looking for Aelin, because she was really mad at Lorcan during those 2 months, and so like he was the one who made sure she got food, and he was the one who like braced her ankle with his magic, and he taught her how to ride a horse, and like they spent a lot of time together, and so they were friends, and so that is a loss she feels as well. And her and Lorcan go out in the hallway outside of where they're keeping Gabriel, and they start chatting as they're like walking, and Lorcan says to her, I heard you were to thank for Erawan's destruction. Aelin says no. Yrene I just came up with the plan. And Lorcan says, without the idea, we'd be filling the bellies of Erawan's beasts. And Aelin's like, have you heard about Orynth? Like, how's it going over there? And Lorcan says it is the same there as it is here. Like, all of the Valg, once Erawan was killed, all of the Valg, like, collapsed. And so the Valg that were, like, holding that city are no longer. When he pulled away, Aelin breathed. What was that for? Oh, Lorcan gives her a hug. I didn't write that down. Lorcan gives her a hug, and then Aelin asks, what was that for? Ask me to stay, was all he said. Her heart began racing. Stay, she whispered. Light. Such beautiful light filled his dark eyes. Ask me to come to Orynth with you. Her voice broke, but she managed to say, come to Orynth with me. Lorcan nodded, as if in answer, and his smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Ask me to marry you. Aelin began crying, even as she laughed. Will you marry me, Lorcan Salvatore? Swept her up in his arms, raining kisses all over her face. As if some final chained part of him had been freed. I'll think about it. Aelin laughed, smacking his shoulder, and then laughed again, louder. Lorcan set her down. What? Aelin's mouth bobbed as she tried to stop her laughing. It's just, if I'm Lady of Orynth, if you marry me, you will take my family name. He blinked. Aelin laughed again. Lord Lorcan Locken? It sounded just as ridiculous coming out. Lorcan blinked at her and then howled. She had never heard such a joyous sound. He swept her up in his arms again, spinning her. I'll use it with pride every damned day for the rest of my life, he said into her hair. And when he set her down, his smile vanished, replaced by an infinite tenderness as he brushed back her hair, hooking it over an ear. I will marry you, Aelin Locken, and I will proudly call myself Lord Lorcan Locken, even when the whole kingdom laughs to hear it. He kissed her gently and lovingly. And when we are wed, he whispered, I will bind my life to yours, so we will never know a day apart, never be alone, ever again. Lorcan clasped her wrist, gently prying her hands from her face. His smile was tentative. If you would like that, he said. Aelin slid her arms around his neck, feeling his thundering heartbeat raging against hers, letting his warmth sink into her bones. I would like that more than anything, she whispered back. This is my favorite scene. I think about it once a week. I mean, again, I do not love binding our lives together. I'm not a fan of death pacts. You know who is a fan of death pacts? Sarah J. Maas. I personally am not a huge fan. Not a huge fan. And I think especially in this book, when we've had like two main characters, Rowan and Aelin, who both have had like big loves die and then like continued living. Like, do we really need the death pacts all the time? I don't know. But maybe this will allow like Lorcan to age. If it does, I like am kind of confused by how it works. We're not given the details. If it allows Lorcan to age alongside Aelin, slay. I love that for them. If it just means that when Aelin dies, Lorcan dies, or vice versa, I don't think that's necessary. I just don't think a death pact is necessary. I don't love them. I think they're kind of weird. You know? Like, sorry, grief is the price we pay for loving people. Anyway, but I do love this scene. I think it's so cute. I love that he like laughs at the fact his name is gonna be Lorcan Locken, and I would like you to know that this man has been Lorcan Locken for me from the moment he stepped on page. You know how if you like think back over the 40 hours of videos that you've watched and I've recorded, I often like lose track of Lorcan's last name. I'm like, what the heck is his last name? That is because in my head and my heart, this man is Lorcan Locken and has been since the moment we saw him. Like, before Aelin was on page, Lorcan was Lorcan Locken. Like, I've had to edit myself saying Lorcan Locken out of these videos more often than I think I had to edit myself saying Aelin when I was talking about Selena. Because he's been Mr. LL. I use, like, initials when I'm, like, taking my notes. To, like, say, who said this? AG, Aelin said that. Who said this? RW, Rowan said that. And this man has been Lorcan Locken, LL, since the moment we saw him. I just thought that was fun. And I love that he's Lorcan Locken. Okay, next. Yrene is chilling in the Great Hall. She's on a stool, which is what is pictured, but it does look silly. She's exhausted, but she like, can't sit still. There's like too much to be done. So she's moving around. Everyone's smiling because they have won, but also like a lot of people have died. And so there's like this joy and sorrow mixed together. And there's just like a lot of energy. And Hafitza comes up to her and is like, go find your husband and go to bed. Like, you need to go rest. She continues, good healers know when to rest. Exhaustion makes for sloppy decisions. And sloppy decisions cost lives, Yrene finished. She lifted her eyes towards the vaulted ceiling high above. You never stop teaching, do you? Hafitza's mouth cracked into a grin. This is life, Yrene. We never stop learning, even at my age. And then Hafitza's like, okay, we're going to stay for probably a few weeks to help, you know, heal everyone that needs to be healed after this battlefield and help everyone recover. But then, like, we will go back to the tour. Like, the healers will return to the tour. And Yrene is like, I know. And Hafitza's like, and you will not be returning with us. And Yrene is like, no, I'm sorry. And Hafitza's like, why are you sorry? You have found love and happiness, Yrene. There is nothing more that I could wish for you. And Yrene is like, well, I, like, know you were training me to be the next, like, healer on high. Like, I'm sorry I wasted your time. And Hafitza's like, no. Waste my time, Yrene Towers. Yrene Westfall. The ancient woman cupped Irene's face with her strong, ancient hands. You have saved us all. Yrene closed her eyes as Hafitza pressed a kiss to her brow, a blessing and a farewell. You will stay in these lands, Hafitza said, her smiling unwavering. But even with the ocean dividing us, we will remain linked here. She touched her chest, right over her heart. And no matter the years, you will forever have a place at the Tor. And Yrene is like, I've actually been thinking that it would be really cool if I started my own tour here, like in Rifthold. I had made a place for all the young people who have healing abilities in this continent to have someplace to go, someplace to learn. And Hafitza's like, I love that idea, Yrene. I love that idea very much, Yrene Westfall. All right, we get to have another Manon moment. Will it make me cry again? Quite possibly. Manon's in the area with Abraxas. And it says, there was an empty space inside her where 12 souls had once burned brightly. Bronwyn, Glenys, and Petra come to talk to her kind of about like final numbers and to like recap the battle and discuss what had happened. I mean, they weren't good. Like they lost a lot of witches, but like they would have been worse. And they make plans to burn their dead under the full moon, which is the next night, which is like the tradition, the burial custom for both the Iron Teeth and the Crocians. And then Petra asks Manon, after that, what then? And Glenys says softly, we go home. And Manon says, you and the Crocians may leave whenever you, and Glenys says, no, to the wastes together. Bronwyn puts a pale purple flower in Manon's hand, small as a thumbnail, beautiful and delicate. A bastion of Crocians just made it here, a bit late, but they heard the call and came, all the way from the wastes. They brought this with them, from the plain before the witch city. The barren, bloodied plain, the land that had yielded no flowers, no life beyond grass and moss, and Manon's sight blurred, and Glenys took her hands, guiding it towards Bronwyn's, before the witch tipped the flower into Manon's palm. Only together can it be undone, Glenys whispered. Be the bridge, be the light. When iron melts, Petra murmured, her blue eyes swimming with tears. The 13 had melted that tower, melted the Iron Teeth within it, and themselves. When flowers spring from fields of blood, Bronwyn went on. Manon's knees buckled as she stared out at that battlefield, where countless flowers had been laid atop the blood and ruins where the 13 had met their ends. Glenys finished. Let the land be witness. The battlefield where the rulers and citizens of so many kingdoms, so many nations had come to pay tribute, to witness the sacrifices of 13 and honor them. Silence fell, and Manon whispered, her voice shaking as she held that small, impossibly precious flower in her palm. And return home. Glenys bowed her head. And so the curse is broken, and so we shall go home, together as one people. The curse was broken. And Manon takes Abraxas out to the battlefield where the earth is still scorched with this big mark where the 13 made their sacrifice. And she places the purple flower at the center of the circle. In thanks and in love, so that they would know. So Astrid would know in the realm where she and her hunter and child walked hand in hand that they had made it. That they were going home. Obviously, Aelin and Rowan also cannot sleep, and so they're going all over the place. They go to the Great Hall to offer their help to the injured. They chat with, like, the Fae of the Wolf Tribe, and the healers from that, like, Fae group meet with the Tor Sesame healers, and kind of, like, are chatting there. And then Rowan and Aelin are just, like, wandering through the castle, and then they decide to go up to the tower where Erawan was banished. And they get up to the tower, and there's this big giant stain on the ground where Erawan died, and Aelin says, I hope it comes out. I was planning to use this balcony to sun myself. And Rowan says, if it doesn't wash off, we'll throw a rug over it. And Aelin says to him, well, now you've seen every hall and room and stairwell. What do you make of your new home? Rowan jokes, a little small, but we'll manage. And then Aelin comments that there's this, like, little garden on, like, a balcony near her bedroom, and it's going to be perfect for Fleetfoot, which is going to be great. She's like, oh my gosh, I want not to go all the way downstairs to take Fleetfoot out at night. Which is just, like, such a, like, modern understanding of how dogs work, you know? And then everyone sort of ends up on the balcony. It's Ren and Adian and Lysandra and Lorcan and Elide and Fenris and Rowan and Aelin. And they're, like, up there and they're looking, and Elide and Lorcan are looking, like, particularly, like, cheerful. And stop Aelin from catching Lorcan's stare and giving him a warning look that conveyed everything she didn't bother to say. If he broke the Lady of Parent's heart, she'd flambe him and would invite Manon Blackbeak to roast some dinner over his burning corpse. Love, slay. I hope they never get rid of that energy. Manon's a little tired right now. You know, she's had a really rough few days. You know, the roughest. Some might argue. And that some would be correct. So she's not up for flambeing in this moment, but you know that she, in, like, give her a month, and she will happily flambe Lorcan if he causes even an ounce of trouble for a lead. Adian's looking at the stain that's on this tower, and Aelin is like, don't even worry, we're going to put a rug over it. And Lysandra's like, I hope it's something tacky rug. And Aelin is like, yes, for sure. I'm thinking pink and purple with an embroidery and flowers, just what Erawan would have wanted. Rowan snorted again. At least this court won't be boring. And Aelin put a hand on her chest, the portrait of outrage. You were honestly worried it would be? Never with Aelin Galifianakis. Gods help us, Lorcan grumbled. A lead elbowed him. Aiden said to Ren, the young lord lingering by the archway, as if still debating making a quick exit. Now's a chance to escape, before you get sucked into this endless nonsense. Aelin extends a hand to Ren, and Ren says to her, you gave up everything and still came back here, still fought. All of it for Terrasen, she said quietly. Yes, I know, Ren said, in the scar down his face, stark in the rising sun. I understand that now. Because remember, Ren was, really, annoyed about the fact that Aelin, left when she was 8. Again, all these people are like, I can't believe you left. Go hang out. 8-year-old old is a second grader. Go hang out with a second grader. They're children, in the fullest extent of children. Okay, who was, a little confused. When I was 8, I thought jungles were pretend. I was like, oh, I've never seen a jungle. Jungles must be imaginary. That's the kind of thinking I was at 8. I've never seen a jungle, therefore they must be imaginary. You can't trust an 8-year-old is literally a thing. Anyway, Ren does. And they talk about what's coming next for them as, all the work that lays ahead as they, rebuild their country and they rebuild, the whole infrastructure of the kingdom and, Orynth as a city and Parenth as a city. And then they finally mention Vaughn. Do you remember Vaughn? Probably not. Vaughn is one of the cadre members that we haven't seen since Heir of Fire. Maeve sent him out on, some mission, and then Sarah, Miss Maas, forgot about him. He's just wandering around. Do you think he knows? I'm sure he felt when, Maeve died and the blood oath is broken, and now he's just wandering around. And Fenris is honestly, he might want to join the court too. He's, kind of a cool guy. And Aelin is like, okay, cool. Invite him. Fenris winked. I promise he's not as miserable as Lorcan. Alid smacked his arm, and Fenris started away, hands up as he laughed. You'll like him, he promised Aelin. All the ladies do, he added with another wink to Lysandra and Alid. And then Aelin is like, actually, what if this was a democracy now? What? Aelin, what do you mean? She's like, obviously, my children would still need to rule because, monarchy is more fun than democracy for books. But, what if we started voting on decisions? We just need, a pro-democracy minute. And they start talking about this, other country that's across the sea that, is a democratic nation, apparently. And Lorcan, or Fenris is like, I can go visit their libraries and, do more research. And Aelin is like, yeah, do whatever the heck you want. And Rowan is like, oh my gosh, we should build a library here and also a theater. And Aelin's like, well, we never really had a theater. And Rowan is like, okay, well, we will now. Obviously, you love a theater. Aelin waved him off. Need I remind you that despite winning this war, we are no longer flush with gold. Rowan slid his arm around her shoulder. Need I remind you that since you beheaded Maeve, I am a prince of Dorinel once again, with access to assets and estates, and that with Maeve outed as an imposter, half of her wealth goes to you and to the other Whitethorns. Aelin blinked at him, slowly. The others grinned, even Lorcan. Rowan kissed her. A new library and a royal theater, he murmured onto her mouth. Consider them my mating presents to you, Fireheart. Okay. Get you a man who will buy you a library and a theater. The next day, it's meetings day. She's thanking all of her allies, essentially. Ansel first apologizes for, not noticing that Lysandra was not Aelin. She was like, she's actually, a very good liar. I should have noticed. My bad. And Galen is like, I actually never met you before. So, really wasn't on me. But nice to meet you, cousin. For realsies this time. And then Aelin's like, I actually saw you one time from, a distance. We don't want to talk about it. And Rowan was like, we don't. She smelled so bad. She was so stinky. And Gavin says, I'm going to assume it was during your former profession, and thank you for not killing me. Aelin chuckled, even as Rolf rolled his eyes. Yes, privateer. Rolf waved a tattooed hand, blood still clinging beneath his nails. I'll refrain from commenting, Aelin smirked. You are heir to the Mycenaean people, she said. Petty squabbles are beneath you now. And then she kind of chats with Rolf, about what he's going to do with the Mycenaeans, because now they've been found. Remember, they were lost. Now they've been found. And I don't remember what they decide. There's, plans. You don't care either. And then she says thank you. She swallowed and put a hand over her heart. Thank you for coming when I asked. Thank you on behalf of Terrasen. I am in your debt. We were in your debt, Ansel countered. I wasn't, Rolf muttered. Aelin flashed him a grin. We're going to have fun, you and I. She surveyed her allies, worn and battled weary, but still standing. All of them still standing. I think we are going to have a great deal of fun. Then she goes up to talk to Manon, because Manon wasn't at that meeting. She walks up to the area and she says, "Queen of the Crocians and of the Iron Teeth," Aelin said, by way of greeting, letting out a low whistle that had Manon turning slowly. Aelin picked at her nails. Impressive! Yet the face that turned towards her. Exhaustion. Grief. "I heard," Aelin said quietly, lowering her hands, but not approaching. Manon said nothing, her silence conveying everything Aelin needed to know. No, she was not all right. Yes, it had destroyed her. No, she did not wish to talk about it. Aelin only said thank you. Manon doesn't say anything in response, and Aelin goes and sits next to Abraxas. And she's looking out over the battlefield where she can see that circle of burnt earth where the 13 had yielded themselves to destroy the Witch Tower. And she says to Manon, "There will be a monument," she said to Abraxas, to Manon. "Should you wish it, I shall build a monument right there, so no one shall ever forget what was given, who we have to thank." And Manon comes and sits down next to Aelin, and Aelin doesn't speak. She doesn't ask questions. And they just sit there in silence as they look out over that decimated field and towards the future beyond it. 10 days later, it's Coronation Day. Everyone is ready. Everyone, cleaned up the castle. Everyone is dressed in their best Terrasen green. They're looking sparkly and fun and fantastic. We learn that the Whitethorn family is going to rule over in Dorinel, Aelin, Lysandra, and there's some representatives here, obviously. Aelin, Lysandra, and Evangeline accompany Aelin down the aisle to the new throne where Darrow is awaiting with her crown. Shining brighter than the snow outside, Aelin lifted her chin and began her final walk home to her crown. Aedion is crying over in the corner. And then Aelin makes her vows. "I offer all that I am and all that I have to Terrasen. I, Aelin Ashriver, Whitethorn Galathinius, swear upon my immortal soul to guard, to nurture, and to honor Terrasen from this day until my very last." Then so it shall be, Darrow responded and reached out a hand. And they had to make a new crown because the Antler Throne and the old crown of Terrasen were destroyed when Ardelane took over. And so they have a new crown, and instead of having a gemstone at the center of the crown, it has a chunk of that crystal that had the King's Flame inside of it. So it's this bright crystal with a bloom of King's Flame at its center. Even amid the shining metal of the crown, the red-orange blossom glowed like a ruby, dazzling in the light of the morning sun, as Darrow lifted the crown from the pillow. He raised it to the shaft of light pouring through the bank of windows behind the dais, the ceremony chosen for this time, this ray of sun, this blessing from Mala herself. And though the Lady of Light was gone forever, Aelin could have sworn she felt a warm hand on her shoulder as Darrow held up the crown to the sun. Could have sworn she felt them all standing there with her, those whom she had loved with her heart of wildfire, whose stories were inked upon her skin. And as the crown came down, as she braced her head, her neck, her heart, Aelin let her power shine. For those who had not made it, for those who had fought, for the world watching, Darrow set the crown upon her head, its weight heavier than she thought. Aelin closed her eyes, letting that weight, that burden and gift settle into her. "Rise," Darrow said. "Aelin Ashriver, Whitethorn Galathinius, Queen of Terrasen." She swallowed a sob, and slowly, her breathing steady despite the heartbeat that threatened to leap out of her chest, Aelin rose. Darrow's grey eyes were bright. Long may she reign. As Aelin turned, the call went up through the hall, echoing off the ancient stones and into the gathered city beyond the castle. "Hail Aelin, Queen of Terrasen." And then Aedion finally gets to swear the blood oath to Aelin, what he's been waiting for this whole moment. Aedion gets pulled up to the dais, and then Rowan hands Aelin a dagger. Aelin paused as she held it over her arm. "You fought for Terrasen when no one else would. Against all odds, beyond all hope, you fought for this kingdom, for me, for these people. Will you swear to continue to do so for as long as you draw breath?" Aedion's head bowed as he breathed. "Yes, in this life and in all others, I will serve you in Terrasen." So Aedion takes the blood oath, and then the little folk all show up. They're like, "Hey, girlie!" Hi! And they crown her with Maeve's crown, which was just in her backpack. Remember she put it in her backpack when they were leaving those underground caves way back at the beginning of this novel? Well, they grabbed it from her backpack and they crowned her with that, so she's double crowned. She's the Fairy Queen of the West. Aelin's fingers trembled, her heart filling to the point of pain as she surveyed the ancient glimmering crown and then looked at the little folk. "Yes," she said to them, "I will serve you too, until the end of my days." And then finally, Aelin sat upon her throne. It weighed on her, nestled against her bones, that new burden. No longer an assassin, no longer a rogue princess. And when Aelin lifted her head to survey the cheering crowd, she smiled. Queen of Terrasen, and the Fairy Queen of the West. She burned bright as a star. But the ceremony's not over yet. She's going to go out in the streets and do a little parade. And she brings everyone with her. She brings Dorian and Chaol, Yrene and Nesryn, and she gestures for everyone to join her. All of you. This day did not belong to her alone. Not at all. And when they balked, Aelin walked forward, took Yrene Westfall by the hand to guide her to the front. Then Manon Blackbeak, Alid Locken, Lysandra, Evangeline, Nesryn, Falik, Bort, Hussar, Ansel of Briarcliff, all the women who had fought by her side, or from afar, who had bled and sacrificed and had never given up hope that this day might come. Walk with me, Aelin said to them, and the men and males falling into step behind them, my friends. And the bells still ringing, Aelin nodded to the guards at the castle gates as they opened at last. The roar from the gathered crowds was loud enough to rattle the stars. As they walked out into the cheering city, into the streets, where people danced and sang, where they wept and clasped their hands, their hearts at the sight of the parade, waving, smiling, rulers, warriors, and heroes who had saved their kingdom, their lands, at the sight of their newly crowned queen, joy lighting their eyes. A new world. A better world. That night there's a ball and Rowan and Aelin dance, and Rowan is actually like sneakily a very good dancer, and Aelin's like kind of annoyed that he kept this a secret, and he says dancing is only for special occasions, but they are like a spectacular sight as they like blaze across the dance floor. Then we get a quick little update from the Southern Continent crew. They are planning to leave in about 5 days post coronation once the healers are good to go. But Sartaq is like, before we leave, we actually have a quick request. So, okay, we're going to leave some people here actually, because some of the Rooken found some wyvern eggs in the Varian Gap and they would love to stay and take care of them. That's okay with you. Sartaq goes on to explain, these are young riders, only 24, he turned to Dorian, but they begged me to ask you if it would be permissible for them to stay when we leave. And Dorian is like, I don't see why they wouldn't be. Actually, like, I would be honored if they stayed to take care of these. How dare you? Actually, literally how dare you? Those eggs belong to the witches. I understand that they're on Ardalain's territory. Okay, totally get that. But like, the wyverns are the witches. And I'm not saying give them to the evil witches. They're still like rogue witches that we're gonna have to deal with. But like, the witches that turned to like work with Manon, and like the Coronation witches, do any of them want a wyvern? What if there's baby witchlings? Like, we are not just giving away wyvern eggs. I don't believe those are Dorian's to give away. This is offensive to me, and like, perhaps I've just been watching too much House of the Dragon. But like, we would never just give away a dragon egg. To these bird people from the Southern Continent? No, those belong to the good witches. What if Abraxas wants to be a father? He should be able to. Anyway, Abraxas could have raised them. He would have raised up a lovely little brood of little baby wyverns. I'm like offended. I like truly am like upset at this. Like, how dare Dorian just be like, yeah, for sure. He like doesn't even consider the fact that like maybe I should talk to Manon first. That's so rude. Anyway, okay, continuing on. Then Dorian turns to Nesryn and is like, I think I'm about to lose another captain of the guard. And Nesryn's like, sorry, I like didn't really want to mention it right in this very moment in front of everyone, but yeah, like, I am gonna be going back with Sartaq. And Dorian's like, but I will be glad to gain another queen who I can call friend. Yeah, Dorian is like, he's got lots of queen friends. And Sartaq is like, actually, she'll be the empress. We don't call them queens down south, just so you know. And Nesryn is like, could you stop? This doesn't actually seem important in this moment. Back in Chaol's room, Chaol's gotten a letter from his mom. And Yrene walks in and he's just holding it in his hands. And she's like, hey, weirdo, why aren't you opening that? And he's like, not all of us are brave as you to take on the Dark Lords, you know. And she's like, okay, anyway, it's just a letter from your mom, you weirdo. Yrene rolled her eyes and dried her face, plopped down on a bed beside him. Do you want me to read it first? And then Yrene does read it. And then she's like, okay, I really just think you should read it. And he's like, no, just tell me what it says. And she's like, it says that she loves you and she has missed you. And that if you and I are open to it, she would love to come live with us. And Terran too. And Chaol's like, aw. And then he does read it, and it ends with this. I am so very proud of you, and I have always been, and always will be, and I hope to see you very soon. Chaol set that letter down, wiped his cheeks, and smiled at his wife. We're going to have to build a bigger house, he said. Irene's answering grin was all he'd hoped for. Cute! So his mom is going to come live with him in Rifthold. Fun! The Ardalain crew go to talk to Manon about what her plans are when she leaves this place. I, like, truly don't know why we brought Yrene and Chaol to this conversation. Like, this really truly should have been a Dorian and Manon conversation. Or Chaol and Yrene, like, hug Manon. They, like, truly don't know this woman. Like, pretty much at all. But anyway, they give her a hug. They're like, bye! See ya! I mean, Chaol probably is like, have they had, like, any interaction with her? Like, briefly in Queen of Shadow. Like, probably, like, some over the past few days, but, like, they are not buddies. They're like, hey, what are you gonna do after you leave this place? And Manon's like, I'm going to the Waste to be Queen of the Witches. And Dorian's like, what are you gonna do after that? And Manon is like, there's no after. And that's where the book ends. But, like, the implication here, that Manon, I think, was trying to spell out for you, Dorian, is there is no after. Like, I'm going to go be queen. Like, that is the activity I'm going to be doing. Like, she literally has a kingdom to rule that has been in, like, ruins that she has to, like, rebuild. Also, she's queen of this kingdom that is composed of two peoples that are literally mortal enemies as of last week, and now are supposed to be united as one, and she's gonna have to deal with that. And they've gotten, like, magic back, and they also have, like, a group of, like, rogue witches. That's gonna be, like, a spooky situation they're gonna have to deal with. They're like, she's literally gonna be busy. What do you mean, what are you gonna do after that? I don't know, that's gonna be in, like, 700 years, so I haven't really thought about it yet. Manon doesn't say all of that. She just says, what is it that you want? Manon doesn't have time for this. She's also, like, in the most, like, paralyzingly deep pain and grief that anyone could imagine. She, like, really does not have time for Dorian's bullshit. And so she asks, what is it that you want? And Dorian, bless his sweetheart, almost says, but doesn't. You. All of you. But instead, Dorian uses his brain for half a second. He says, a small faction of the Rooken are remaining in Ardaleen to train the wyvern hatchlings. I want them to be my new aerial legion, and I would like you and the other Iron Teeth to help them. Okay, like, she's not busy enough. Again, she has a whole kingdom to rule, Dorian. He continues. Go to the wastes, rebuild, but consider it. Coming back, if not to be my crowned rider, then to train them, he added a bit softly, and to say hello every now and again. And then Yrene pipes up. I love Yrene. In this moment, I want to punch her in the nose. You could just marry each other, Yrene said. Dorian whipped his head to her, incredulous. It'd make it easier for both of you, so you don't need to pretend. Cale gaped at his wife. Yrene shrugged. And be a strong alliance for our two kingdoms. And Manon goes, we'll see. And then she just flies away. Okay, guys. Here's where I have to, like, make a confession. And I, like, totally understand if you aren't in a place where you want to hear this from me. It's going to be about how I don't think Manon and Dorian work long term. And if you don't want to hear it, great. I love that. Cover your ears. But I don't think they end up together long term. I love Manon and Dorian in this book. I think they were really great together. I think it was so cutie. I think it was a great moment for both of them. But I just don't see how it works long term without one of them giving up their kingdoms, which I don't think makes sense for either of them. And I don't think we're given any evidence that, like, Dorian is even considering it, even though he's asking Manon essentially to give up her kingdom. Like, being the queen of a kingdom is a full-time job. And also, like, long distance I don't think really makes sense when you need to travel, like, multiple days to see your partner. And there's, like, and, like, you were both so busy so you can't leave your kingdoms for long periods of time. I do think they probably, like, hook up a few more times. But then I think what happens is Manon realizes Dorian, like, really wants to be in a relationship where he's, like, really pretty codependent. He, like, wants to be obsessed with his wife. Like, he wants to be in a relationship like Cale is in a relationship with his wife, where he's, like, obsessed with her and is with her all the time. Like, he wants a little bit of codependency, and Manon can't offer that. And Dorian, as we already know, pointed out that, like, marrying Manon would be like caging her. And, like, he could never do that to her. So I do think they hook up a few more times, and then I think it's over. And I think that's okay. I think that's okay. I think they remain friends afterwards. I think it's fine. I think they have a lovely time. But I just don't see them lasting past a couple years. I don't know what Manon's up to. I don't know if Manon ever finds someone else. I think Dorian does. I think Dorian gets himself a wife, has a few babies, has a lovely time. Or maybe he's just in a throuple with Yrene and Cale. And that could be kind of cool too. Finally, it's goodbye day. Aelin tried to convince everyone to stay. She's like, what if everyone just stayed until the spring? And then you went back to your kingdoms. But, like, they had stuff to do. Like, you know, they have to go, like, back to their homes. We were told that the witches had already left at dawn. And the Southern Continent group had left shortly after that. And Nesrin and Aelin had whispered back and forth for a while. And there's this sense that, like, these two queens will, like, forever be friends to each other as they, like, rule their kingdoms on opposite ends of things, one way far to the north and one far to the south, that they will always be, like, allies. The healers had gone with them, and Yrene had said goodbye to her friends and to Afitza and had just, like, cried as they left, because that was, like, a hard goodbye, but we knew that was coming. And then Ansel left, and it said of that, she and Aelin had traded taunts and then laughed and then cried, holding each other. Another bond that wouldn't be so easily broken, despite the distance. Then the Silent Assassins leave, then Prince Galen and the Ashrivers. Only Rolf and Falcon would remain at the castle until spring. Everyone else is leaving. And so all we have left is Cale, Dorian, and Yrene. Yrene hugs Rowan and Aelin and says, when your first child is near, send for me. I will help with the birth. Fae births are notoriously, like, difficult. And so Yrene is like, #1 healer at your service. And then as she hugs Aelin, she says to her, "We are a long way from Anesh," Yrene whispered, "but no longer lost." Aelin whispered back, voice breaking as they embraced. The two women who held the fate of the world between them, who had saved it. And Rowan hugs the boys goodbye, and then Rowan steps back and lets his wife say goodbye, like the hardest goodbyes to her boys. "I love you both," she whispered, "and no matter what may happen, no matter how far we may be, that will never change. We will see you again," Kale said, but even with his voice thick with tears, "Together," Dorian breathed, shaking, "we will rebuild this world together." She couldn't stand it, this ache in her chest, but she made herself pull away and smile at their tear-streaked faces, a hand on her heart. "Thank you for all you have done for me." Dorian bowed his head. "Those words I'd never thought I'd hear from you." She barked a rasping laugh and gave him a shove. "You're a king now! Such insults are beneath you." Aelin smiled at Kale, at his wife waiting beyond him. "I wish you every happiness," she said to him. To them both. Such light shone in Kale's bronze eyes that she had never seen before. "We will see each other again," he repeated. Then he and Dorian turned towards their horses, towards the bright day beyond the castle gates, towards their kingdom to the south, shattered now, but not forever. Not forever. And Aelin stands and watches until they disappear over the edge of the plain. And then we find out that Rowan has a new tattoo, and it's Gabriel's name, which Lorcan and Fenris also have matching. They have matching road tattoos. Adian, however, had asked Rowan for a different design to add Gabriel's name to the Terrace knot already inked over his heart. Adian had been quiet while Rowan had worked, quiet enough that Rowan had begun telling him story after story about the lion, the adventures they'd shared, the lands they'd seen, the wars they'd waged. He could see it now, the halls restored to their splendor, the plain and the river beyond sparkling, the staghorns beckoning. He could hear the music she'd bring to the city, and the laughter of the children in the streets, in these halls, in their royal suite. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, peering up at his face. Rowan brushed a kiss to her mouth. "That I get to be here with you." He tucked her in closer. "I am thinking about how very grateful I am that we made it, that I found you, and how, even with all of that work to be done, I will not mind a moment of it because you are with me. And tomorrow," she asked breathlessly, and they both looked to each other to smile, "will you work to rebuild this kingdom, this world with me tomorrow?" Tomorrow and every day after that, for every day of the 1,000 blessed years they were granted together, and beyond. Aelin kissed him again and took his hand, guiding him into the castle, into their home. "To whatever end," she breathed. Rowan followed her as he had his entire life, long before they had ever met, before their souls had sparked into existence. "To whatever end, Fireheart." He glanced sidelong at her. "Can I give you a suggestion of what we should rebuild first?" Aelin smiled. Eternity opened before them, shining and glorious and lovely. "Tell me tomorrow." Then we get a little baby epilogue called A Better World, which takes place in the spring. Spring has come. She spent the whole winter rebuilding her kingdom. We find out that she has written the royal family of Elwë, who has been working really hard to rebuild things down south. The letter Aelin had written to Nahimi's parents had been the most joyous of her life. "I hope to meet you soon," she'd written, "and repair this world together." "Yes," they had replied. "Nahimi would wish it so." Aelin had kept their letter on her desk for months, but not a scar on her palm, but a promise of tomorrow, a vow to make the future as brilliant as Nahimi had dreamed it could be. We find out that Aelin is married. Aelin and her new husband, Lorcan Locken, had just returned to Parenth, but they're going to be back in a couple weeks because Adian and Lysandra are getting married, which is so fun and cutie. The moment we're zoomed into in the epilogue is one of the first mornings of spring. She wakes up, Fleetfoot is curled up at the foot of her bed, finally reunited with Fleetfoot. Her husband is still sleeping next to her. She sneaks out to the balcony to get a breath of the spring air. She sees something. She immediately goes back in the room and wakes Rowan, and he joins her out on this balcony as they look over Terracin. The mountain wind brushed away her tears, carrying with it a song, ancient and lovely, from the very heart of Oakwald. From the very heart of this earth, Rowan twined his fingers in hers and whispered, "Awe in every word, for you, Fireheart. All of it is for you." Aelin wept in joy that lit her heart brighter than any magic could ever be. For across every mountain, spread beneath the green canopy of Oakwald, carpeting the entire plain of Theralis, the king's flame was blooming. We did it, guys. That's the end. I love that ending so much. I do not see enough Throne of Glass art that just says the king's flame is blooming. I think that ending is the perfect thing. Anyway, that's the end of Kingdom of Ash, which is the end of our Throne of Glass recap. Thank you for spending all these hours with me. It was so much fun. I loved it so much. I hope you did too. I'm excited to talk about more books with you, although we did start with my literal favorite, so I don't know. Maybe we'll find a new favorite together. That could be fun. It's possible. Maybe one day we'll just do Throne of Glass again. I'll just start over. But for now, this is goodbye to our beloved Aelin and the crew. Unless Sarah decides to write more. Sarah! That would be the best. Oh my gosh, I'd be so excited. But until then, this is the end of the Throne of Glass series. I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much. I'll see you later.